You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2864, Chapter 2864, Chapter 605 Return to the Human Realm 2. Chapter 2864, Chapter 605 Return to the Human Realm 2. 10 Sun Moon Divine Runes. If I can obtain the Sea of Consciousness secret realm and have enough willpower, I can forcefully raise the divine runes. If I raise all 30 of my divine runes willpower will reach the 9th level of the Mountain and Sea realm. The 9th level of the Mountain and Sea realm is only at the aperture level. It lacks the process of casting a body and changing yuan qi. The divine runes are indeed the path that leads directly to the rules. Ever since Lu Hong had pointed out some things, Su Yu's understanding of the Tao of cultivation had greatly deepened. Many things were often just lacking that stroke of genius. When Lu Hong had pointed out that the divine script was the embryonic form of the laws, from then on, Su Yu had some unique insights into the Tao of the divine script and the Tao of the physical body. Many things that he did not understand in the past could now be easily solved. Lu Hong. Su Yu thought of Lu Hong. Recently, that fellow had been living in the city and waiting for death. He did not know what was going through his mind. With just one sentence, you have pointed out the secret of the divine text. You are not simple. Su Yu thought in his heart. A moment later, his body trembled and he shuttled through the void, instantly disappearing from where he was. Yo, Su Yu is here. What a rare guest. At this moment, Lu Hong was living in a big house that belonged to him. He was drinking tea in boredom. When he saw Su Yu, he immediately greeted him with a smile. Su Yu, what's the matter? Su Yu glanced at him, PM about to return to the human race. Teacher Lu, is there anything you need my help with? Why don't you come back with me? Don't. Lu Hong sighed, I've offended a lot of people now, and I don't have your strength. If I go back, won't I be asking for trouble? Su Yu looked at him deeply and didn't say much. He thought for a moment and asked, Teacher Lu, let me ask you a question. Do you know the heavenly cycle technique? The 720 acupoints fusion technique. Lu Hong was extremely dejected. Can one call you uncle? I really don't know anything. What do you think I know? In fact, I really don't know anything. I'm not lying to you. Lying to you is like lying to a dog. Su Yu ignored him. At this moment, the cue ball and the civilized will said respectfully, Senior Cooker, wake up a little. There's food? No, I want to ask, is there anything special about this person in front of me? In the civilized will, Cooker was a little unhappy. How annoying. They didn't even give him food, yet he still dared to wake me up. How annoying. Although he was impatient, he still reluctantly looked at it. After looking at it for a while, he replied, there's nothing special about it. The divine runes are a little special, the power of rules is quite strong. I want to eat it. He even wanted to eat the cooked cake. Su Yu's heart stirred slightly. Senior, the power of rules means, the divine runes are very strong. What do you want to ask? I want to know if it's some old antique who's pretending. No. The cue ball thought for a moment and said, if he's not an old antique in disguise, there's a high probability, how should I put it? It's possible that the divine runes have touched upon a certain rule. The divine runes are stronger, and very few people touch upon that rule. There might be some conflict with the owner of the rule. Simply put, he might have inherited some of the owner's things, but from what I can see, he shouldn't be an old figure. Su Yu's heart moved slightly. A collision of rules. Lu Hong. This. Su Yu had previously suspected that he was some big figure disguising himself, but in the end, it turned out that he wasn't. The cue ball was also the incarnation of rules, so it should know quite a lot of things, so its judgment wouldn't be too bad. In that case, Could it be that Lu Hong had inherited some of the ancient experts' memories because a certain divine text overlapped with a certain rule? An old grandpa in a dream? Surely not. Su Yu thought to himself. Then, he looked at Lu Hong and said with a chuckle, "Teacher Lu, let me ask you something. Do you often dream?" Lu Hong laughed dryly and said, "Su Yu, what do you mean by this? Do you really believe that there is an old grandpa in a dream?" Su Yu had said this the last time. Su Yu suddenly thought of himself. His eyes moved slightly. Then, he thought of something and asked, "Teacher, tell me the truth. Did you actually have a dream? In the dream, did you see some scenes, or even the inheritance of memories?" "What?" Lu Hong looked as if he didn't know. Su Yu frowned. "Teacher, I'm very serious. Let me ask again. Did you have a dream? As for the time when the dream happened, roughly how long?" Lu Hong laughed dryly. "One really didn't." Su Yu said calmly, "Is that so? Teacher, do you think I can't tell? Or do you not know the situation? If I'm not wrong, the reason why you know so much is because of a divine text. It's very special, and it overlaps with a rule. So, you can know some information that others don't know, right?" Lu Hong looked at Su Yu and frowned slightly. After a long while, he said, "Su Yu. Teacher, is it a dream or a direct memory transfer?" Su Yu also asked straightforwardly. Lu Hong was speechless. After a long while, he said, "Have you had such an experience before?" PM asking teacher. Lu Hong said weakly, "What's there to ask? I didn't ask you what kind of opportunity you had." "You. Really?" Although he said that, he still said weakly, "It can be considered as the emergence of memories. Sometimes, they appear suddenly. This is also the reason why I was born in a small clan and didn't have enough resources, but was able to become a genius of the Great Xia Prefecture's Institute of Civilization." "When did it start? When did it start?" Lu Hong thought for a moment and said, "It has been more than 10 years. I had it when I was still in the middle school. Only then was I able to enter the Great Xia Academy." You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2865, Chapter 2865, Chapter 605, Return to the Human Realm 3. Chapter 2865, Chapter 605, Return to the Human Realm 3. More than 10 years. Su Yu asked again, "More than 10 years exactly?" "You." Lu Hong was even more speechless. He calculated, "It's almost 15 years. Su Yu frowned. He was 6 years old, and a dream monster had appeared to kill him. It had been more than 14 years now. If he counted, it was almost 15 years. Were the two related? Did something happen in the universe 14 years ago? It didn't seem to be a big deal. Did Lu Hong admit that he might have been dreaming, or that it wasn't a dream, but a sudden memory? About 15 years. The changes in the rules overlapped. Could it be that it wasn't in the universe, but above the grid? There were changes on the grid. Therefore, there were some special changes. Su Yu was not sure, because he was still far away. He had no way to know if there were any changes on the grid, or if there were any changes in the grid. Even if the so-called hidden antiques could not appear due to the rules. Su Yu felt that they might not be at the level of the ancient king of men. At most, they would be able to kill a bunch of third-level Dao fusing experts and a few fellows who were close to the great Dao realm. Otherwise, the human race would have been exterminated long ago. It's getting more and more interesting. Su Yu laughed and looked at Lu Hong. He said with a smile, "Teacher Lu has been idling here all day. I think that he wants to take advantage of my departure to look for opportunities. Or do you think that Su Yu, will snatch your opportunities while I'm here?" "Forget it." Su Yu turned around and said, Master Xinghong, after I leave, if Teacher Lu wants to go to the Dead Souls realm, just go. Ask Master Xingyu to let him go. I won't stop him. Everyone has their own fate. Lu Hong laughed dryly and said, Su Yu, I don't have the intention to escape. There's no need. Su Yu said indifferently, Teacher, although you have schemed against me a few times, I have also taken revenge. I still have to show some gratitude for the matter of the undead receiving the order. However, Teacher probably doesn't need me to repay you. Let's forget about this matter. The grudge between you and me ends here. Lu Hong smiled dryly and glanced at Su Yu. After a long while, he said, that, you might still owe me something. Lu Hong laughed dryly. You promised to help my teacher solve his problem and help him advance to the Sun and Moon realm, but you never helped him. Now, that hairy ball can probably devour my teacher's divine runes. Teacher is still in seclusion at the Great Xia Civilization Academy and probably won't be able to hold on much longer. If you go back this time, help me solve this problem. Our grudge ends here. Su Yu was surprised. You still remember this? That's my teacher. Lu Hong bared his teeth and smiled, Su Yu, in the eyes of outsiders, you also don't recognize your own family. You're selfish, and you kill without calculation. But when it comes down to it, you didn't receive much favor from your teacher. Aren't you still running around for them? Humans, there are good and bad. But at the end of the day, there are still some things that you can't let go of, right? Lu Hong smiled and said, that teacher of mine may not have taught me much, but how should I put it, before he went into seclusion, he helped me solve a lot of problems. I can't repay him for that. I can't just watch him die in seclusion, right? Su Yu smiled and said, did promise him back then. Alright, I'll go back. If your teacher is still in seclusion, I'll naturally help him. Thank you. Lu Hong bared his teeth and smiled brightly. No emotions could be seen from his smile. Su Yu also smiled. Both of them smiled brightly. Su Yu could not help but think of the first time he met this fellow. His smile was so bright that he made him class monitor. He thought it was a good thing, but in the end, he was cheated by him. From then on, Su Yu felt that people with bright smiles were usually not good people. A truly good person would not have so many ridiculous things. The two of them smiled at each other. Su Yu disappeared. There was no need to continue smiling with Lu Hong. This fellow did not feel tired even after smiling for a day. Human calendar, year 352 of the Anping calendar, mid-May. On this day, Su Yu set off, preparing to head to the human realm. There was a feeling that things had changed and people had changed. In the 351st year of the Anping calendar, which was also the middle of the 5th month, Su Yu left Daming Manor alone and began to roam the world. After that, he charged into the battlefield of the heavens. Now, a year had passed. And in a year's time, Su Yu, who had left Daming Manor and wasn't even a match for the mountains and seas, was now invincible. And a year ago, in the 5th month, his father had just left, and it had only been 2 years since then. From Kaiyuan, Su Yu had reached his current state in 2 years. These 2 years were also the most eventful period in the universe. One battle after another. Dozens of invincible deaths. The heavenly battlefield had been open for nearly 1,000 years, and the human realm had been open for more than 400 years. The number of invincible deaths today was even more than when the human realm was open. At the entrance of the ancient city, Su Yu walked up the city wall and looked into the distance. He smiled. I'm going back. This was the first time he had returned openly. Returning to the human realm. Su Yu had gone back a year after leaving the human realm. However, he didn't go back with his identity as Su Yu. This time, it was different. With a light shout, 35 huge cities appeared on the heavenly battlefield, surrounding the ancient city of Xinghong where Su Yu was. In an instant, they pierced through the void and headed toward the East Rift Valley of the human race. Their speed wasn't too fast, but it wasn't too slow either. Experts were scouting from all directions and far away. Su Yu was about to return to the human realm. In the 35 cities, teams of ancient city guards formed into groups and prepared Su Yu's carriage. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2866, Chapter 2866, Chapter 605 Return to the Human Realm 4. Chapter 2866, Chapter 605 Return to the Human Realm 4. According to Tianhe, this was the first time the two powerful forces had come into close contact. They had to make an appearance. Otherwise, the human realm would look down on the lord of the ancient city. Soon, 35 giant cities appeared across the East Rift Valley. They blotted out the sky and covered the sun. Teams of ancient city soldiers wearing armor quickly left the city and lined up to support the lord of the ancient city, Su Yu. The auras of the city lords also exploded out, and they were incredibly powerful. The city lords were at least at the 9th level of the Sun-Moon realm. Opposite the Eastern Rift Valley. At this moment, there was also a sea of people. The army was displayed, and each and every one of them was invincible. They looked at the opposite side of the valley, and the giant city gave off an intense aura of death. Some people frowned, some people didn't change their expressions, and some people lightly shook their heads. At this moment, the great Qin king walked out of his camp and looked across. He smiled faintly and said, "Su Yu, with such a large formation, those who don't know would think that you're here to attack the human race." Su Yu stepped out in the air. He was still wearing his white robe, and he had a gentle smile on his face as he said, "Great Qin king, please forgive me. I, Su Yu, will not give up even if the myriad worlds perish. When I'm out, it's best to be careful." He stepped out and instantly appeared in front of the army of the ancient city. He looked at the other side and then looked at the Eastern Rift Valley. He smiled and said, "When I stepped out of the Eastern Rift Valley and entered the Sea of Desire Plains, one thought that one might not have the chance to return to the human realm in this life." The great Qin king was silent. At that time, Su Yu had left the territory of the human realm to seek refuge. That was why he had left. It was difficult to talk about the past again. However, Su Yu was still smiling. "At that time, I met my father here. My father cooked a meal of braised pork for me. One ate until my face was filled with tears. I told my father that I would come back. If I come back again, I will meet him openly. I will never be so secretive again." Today, one seemed to have done it. Su Yu's smile was brilliant as he looked around and said, "Luckily, it's only a year. We won't be strangers after meeting each other. I'm very glad that in this year, I have overcome countless difficulties and come to this day." The great Qin king continued to be silent. Beside him, the great Zhou king walked out and said with a smile, "City Lord Su, the past is in the past. The future will only get better and better. I think that you will see this and see it very clearly." Su Yu smiled and said, "I hope so." Then City Lord Su, go to the passageway now and enter the human realm. The great Zhou king looked at Su Yu. Su Yu smiled and said, "There's no rush. No matter what, I am also one of the humans." Although he was no longer in the human realm, all of the immortals present were my seniors. It was fine if they did not know each other in the past, but since they had met today, why not introduce them to His Majesty? It's also to prevent us from not knowing each other in the future. The great Zhou king smiled and looked around. There were quite a few invincible humans here today, and most of them were present. Su Yu's formation was quite big, and the humans could feel the overwhelming pressure. Without invincible, they really didn't have the confidence. The great Zhou king looked around and smiled, "All right, I'll introduce you one by one." He pointed at the great Qin king and said with a smile, "There's no need to mention this person. He's the founder of the great Qin manor, the great Qin king." Su Yu bowed slightly. Very quickly, he pointed at a square-faced man with a square face standing beside the great Qin king. Su Yu recognized him. This was the great Xia king. "This is the founder of the great Xia manor, the great Xia king." Su Yu smiled and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, the great Xia king, I've long heard of you." He had lived in the great Xia mansion since he was young, so he knew what the great Xia king looked like. Majestic. Valiant. Overbearing. Su Yu knew that the great Xia king had made a few moves, but he could not connect the great Xia king to the Sir who was the gatekeeper at the southern Yuan gate. He could not imagine what the great Xia king's mentality was like when he was in his second year of high school, when he carved the words, "the most beautiful man in the world in godless Xia," on his sword. Narcissism? Or what? Therefore, he wanted to laugh, but he held it in. The majestic emperor of Great Xia looked at Su Yu and nodded slightly. He was still as majestic, cold, domineering, and brave as others saw him. He was the emperor of Great Xia. This was his persona. This is the king of Great Han. Su Yu also maintained a respectful posture and bowed slightly. The Great Han king nodded and smiled. He was considered one of the earlier batch and had interacted with Su Yu before. He knew that Su Yu's name was invincible. This was the time when Zhu Tiandao went to seek help to file a complaint. This is the great Shang king. Su Yu looked at another person. He was middle-aged and looked a little old-fashioned. He smiled and bowed slightly. He didn't say much. He didn't have much enmity with the great Shang mansion. However, there was a pavilion elder from the great Shang mansion who went to kill him and was killed on Mount Xingluo. Later on, he challenged Shan Xiong. Shang Tianjiao, a descendant of the Shang family, once looked for trouble. This is the king of the Tang Empire. Su Yu looked again and bowed slightly. He was not familiar with the Tang Empire, but he knew Qing Mo. This is the king of the Song Empire. Su Yu had seen this person before. He still bowed. What he respected was not his strength, but these unrivaled people who had opened the mansion. They had stepped forward when the human race was in danger. This is the De Yuan king. In the distance, the De Yuan king, who had a cold smile on his face, saw Su Yu bow and laughed coldly. He was the first to speak. "If you can't take this bow, City Lord Su, don't be too polite." The great Zhou king looked at him, and the great Qin king also turned to look at him. The De Yuan king was arrogant and said with a cold smile, "The rest is negotiable. One don't agree with the lord of the sacred land." The great Qin king frowned and looked at him, but the De Yuan king did not change his mind. Su Yu did not care and said with a light smile, "Lord of the sacred land." The lord of the sacred land that the De Yuan king mentioned, could it be that he is the god of war, seeking for the two great sacred lands? You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2867, Chapter 2867, Chapter 605 Return to the Human Realm 5. Chapter 2867, Chapter 605 Return to the Human Realm 5. Su Yu chuckled and said, "Weren't those two places destroyed? Are they going to be rebuilt?" The Yuan king said coldly, "Why pretend to be ignorant when you know what's going on? Su Yu, what qualifications do you have to take on this responsibility? Did you save the human race from the fire and water, or did you protect billions of people? Or did you guard the borders of the human race for hundreds of years? Or did you enlighten the human race and let them become the overlord of the heavens? Or something else?" The De Yuan king said directly, "Without any outstanding achievements, does it all depend on talent? If that's the case, then in the future, whoever is more talented will become the human king. Wouldn't that be straightforward?" Su Yu smiled. "Achievements? talk about achievements. Let's not talk about the Lord of the Holy Land first. Am I willing to become it? I only have one thing to say, you, the Yuan King, the so-called achievements, may not be comparable to me. The Yuan King frowned. Su Yu said indifferently, without me, you can still stand here so easily today and tell me all this? Without me, the current you should be suppressed by the gods, demons, immortals, and other races until you cannot raise your head. Without me, you may not even be able to leave your home. Without me, can your army be so powerful? Without me, you, the Yuan King, are nothing. The Yuan King said coldly, there is cause and effect. Su Yu, if it weren't for you, the human immortal alliance wouldn't be so easily broken. Su Yu smiled, pointed at him, and shook his head. Sigh. Poor man. Outsiders don't know about the alliance between the immortals and humans, but you don't know the inside story. Ridiculous. Without me, the immortals would eat you, and you would probably have to call me Dad. The Yuan King looked at him coldly. Su Yu said calmly, don't look at me like that, the Yuan King. I'm not your subordinate, I'm Su Yu. I've already said that the human race is sometimes very troublesome and annoying. I'm the master of the ancient city, and when I talk to the great Qin King, the human race dares to interrupt anyone. Such unruly behavior is extremely laughable. No one dares to refute the words of those from the ancient times and the desolate realm. What a laughable fellow. The Yuan King frowned and said, Su Yu, there's no need to pressure me with these things. The great Qin King is the commander of the human race, but I have the right to speak my own thoughts. I just don't agree with you, Su Yu. Xia Longwu, the people of Qin Town, in my opinion, even if they are not as strong as you, one will acknowledge you as the Lord of the Holy Land. I don't acknowledge you, Su Yu. Su Yu laughed. Alright, cut the crap. I'll just exchange a few words with you, and you still don't know what your surname is. Su Yu sneered. The Lord of the Sacred Land? How big? How sacred? How strong? How good? Su Yu sneered. Are you stronger than the guards behind me? 35 stone sculptures instantly appeared behind him. Each of them looked at the Yuan King with cold eyes. Their powerful pressure intimidated everyone. Su Yu said coldly, the power, status, and benefits in your eyes are worthless in my eyes. Great Zhou King, continue to introduce him. For such an ignorant person, I respect him for protecting the human race in the past. I despise him for being short-sighted and looking down on this generation of boors. On account of the fact that we are all humans, and on account of the great Qin King and the rest of you, otherwise, I will definitely let his blood spill across the heavens today. The Yuan King snorted and the great Zhou King shouted, enough. With a rebuke, the Yuan King did not speak again in the end. He really wanted to try it out with Su Yu. Did Su Yu really think that he could not do anything to him just because his brute strength was strong? Around them, some of the invincible soldiers did not say anything. Behind them, the countless soldiers were all trembling in fear. They did not want to start a fight. If they really started a fight, it was not that the humans did not dare to fight, but if they started a fight, they felt that it was too much of a loss. It was not worth it. Su Yu was clearly a human, a natural ally of the human race on the heavenly battlefield. If they started fighting, it would be a huge loss no matter who they killed. The great Zhou King didn't say anything more and quickly introduced one invincible expert after another to Su Yu. This is the Forbidden Heavenly King. The great Zhou King introduced one person. Su Yu looked at that person with a cold expression. He looked pretty and young. When he saw Su Yu looking at him, he nodded slightly and revealed a faint smile. Su Yu also nodded and smiled. I've even drawn divine runes from the Forbidden Heavenly King's manual. The method to suppress the restriction is indeed the best in the heavens. City Lord Su, you flatter me. The Forbidden Heavenly King replied with a smile. Suyu didn't say much and continued to get to know the others. When he introduced them to the heavenly caste king, Suyu smiled again. Last time, the Black Armor King didn't come to my side. Otherwise, it would have been appropriate to kill him to make armor. Next time, if there's a chance, I'll help Senior kill him and forge a set of armor. Hehe, then thank you very much. The Tianzhu King smiled and was not in a hurry. This is the Silkworm Exterminating King. Suyu looked at the Silkworm Exterminating King and smiled. Senior's cultivation technique, the time technique, lives up to its reputation. Among the many martial arts that I have learned, it is enough to rank in the top 3. Senior's cultivation is extremely good. The Silkworm Exterminating King laughed and said, "It's alright, but ordinary cultivation techniques are indeed not as good as mine. Next time, if there's a chance, let's have a good spar." Soon, the great Zhou King introduced the invincible of the younger generation. When the introduction reached Zhou Tianyuan, Suyu nodded casually and did not bow again. Zhou Tianyuan did not care. Zhu Tianfang, Xia Longwu, Qin Zhen, these second generation. Suyu only bowed slightly when he introduced Xia Longwu. The others did not bow. After the introduction, there were 34 invincible here. The rest were either in various places or in the human realm. Just like that, Suyu could be considered to have met more than half of the unrivaled experts of the human race. He was judging their strength. However, the cue ball's voice sounded in his mind. Some of them smell quite good. That great Zhou King smells so good. Can I eat him? Suyu hurriedly said in his mind. He was joking. He wanted to eat the great Zhou King the moment he arrived. Then a great battle would break out immediately. Alright, what a pity. The cue ball felt a little regretful. On the other side of the canyon, the great Zhou King's brows twitched slightly. He glanced at Suyu and narrowed his eyes slightly. In that instant just now, Suyu's side transmitted a feeling that made him feel a little shaken. He did not think about it and quickly said with a smile, "City Lord Su, then don't waste your time here. Why don't we go to the human realm to gather? Your teachers and friends are all waiting for you there. It's better to obey than to be respectful." Suyu smiled and said, "I'll have to trouble everyone today." He took a step forward and walked toward the opposite side of the canyon. Behind him, Tian Mie said coldly, "Suyu, if anything happens, you can wave the City Lord token at any time. We'll definitely charge into the human realm and shatter this realm." Suyu berated, "Senior Tian Mie, how can you do this? Everyone here is my senior, how can you attack me? If something really happens, Senior, don't act recklessly. Senior, call a few half-emperors and come together." The humans were speechless. Was this a threat? Probably. If something happened to Suyu, the guards would take action. There was also the half-emperor. This guy was a bomb. Who knew if anything would happen after entering the human realm? For a moment, Suyu walked towards them. It felt like he was walking towards a self-destruct, causing some of the invincible ones to hesitate. Should they let Suyu enter the human realm? Unfortunately, the great Qin King and the others had made a decision. If they didn't agree, the great Qin King and the others would agree. There was no way to stop them. They could only warn the juniors of the various manners to be careful. They really couldn't afford to provoke this fellow now. If they weren't careful, they could easily cause big trouble. The great Qin King, great Zhou King, and the others quickly walked towards Suyu. After exchanging a few pleasantries, they walked towards the human realm entrance. In the direction of the East Rift Valley, there were still dozens of invincible experts. The ancient city had to be defended as well. They had to be careful of any trouble. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2868, Chapter 2868, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills Cho Subscribe, L. Chapter 2868, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills Cho Subscribe, L. Su Yu walked forward, flanked by the Great Qin King and the Great Zhou King. The three of them were in sync. Su Yu smiled and paused for a moment, allowing the Great Qin King to take a step ahead. The Great Qin King turned his head to look at him, and Su Yu said playfully, "Your Majesty, please take me for a walk. Haven't been here for a year, so I'm not familiar with the road." The Great Qin King smiled, not as stiff as before. "Not bad. It's only been a year, so the changes aren't too big." The Great Qin King walked very quickly, like a dragon and a tiger. The Great Zhou King did not feel anything, but his speed was not slow either, as if he lacked some sense of presence. Besides Su Yu, even Su Yu did not feel the presence of this person. This kind of person was the scariest. Su Yu was actually not afraid of people like the Great Qin King, but he was afraid of people like the Great Zhou King. No matter how strong the Great Qin King was, he would at most stab you to death with his spear. People like the Great Zhou King. Perhaps 1 second, he would be chatting with you with a smile, and the next second, he would suddenly stab you through the heart with his sword. Walking with this kind of person was not comfortable. And the Great Qin King in front of him was actually not comfortable either. Su Yu and the Great Zhou King were walking at the same pace, but they were both light and light, making the Great Qin King feel a bit awkward. It was as if there was no one beside him, but he knew that there were two people beside him. And they were not weak. Needless to say, the Great Zhou King was not weak either. Su Yu was quite strong, but his law energy was not very good. However, his brute force was definitely comparable to those existences at the 6th or 7th stage of eternity. And now, both of their auras were faintly discernible. It was as if they existed, but also as if they didn't exist. As the Great Qin King walked, every step he took had a sound, and there was the sound of heavy footsteps. As for Su Yu and the Great Zhou King, when they walked, they felt as if they were floating. The Great Qin King took a few steps before suddenly stopping. Su Yu and the Great Zhou King stopped almost at the same time. The Great Qin King turned his head to look at Su Yu and smiled stiffly. As the commander of a region, you must let people feel that you are down to earth. Down to earth. Reliable. Surprisingly, you can win, but surprisingly, you can't fight for long. Su Yu smiled and said, "What His Majesty the Qin King has taught is true." The Great Qin King continued to walk, but there was still no sound behind him. Around him, the invincible experts looked on silently and did not interrupt. Obviously, everyone knew what the Great Qin King meant, and Su Yu knew it as well. However, Su Yu continued to do as he pleased and did not care at all. The Great Qin King sighed in his heart and did not say anything else as he walked. He asked, "Is there any trouble recently that you need help with?" "In the Starry Palace, if it wasn't for your help in killing the Blood Fire and the many Eons, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to return." Around them, some of the invincible ones knew about this, and some of the invincible ones seemed to know about it for the first time. On the outer perimeter, some Sun-Moon experts were following behind. When they heard this, they were all surprised and shocked. What did the Great Qin King mean? Was the powerful Great Qin King saved by Su Yu? Su Yu laughed lightly and said, "No, there's no need to trouble His Majesty the Qin King. Regarding the matter of the Starry Manor, I killed the people myself and solved the problem myself. It has nothing to do with His Majesty the Qin King." The Great Qin King frowned and said, "You can't say that. Without you, all the races would definitely try their best to kill me if they knew my identity. It was thanks to you who gave me the medicine and the divine weapon that I managed to barely recover my previous combat strength." As soon as these words were said, countless people in the surroundings stopped in their tracks. All of them had looks of shock on their faces. Even some of the invincible ones were extremely shocked and had looks of fear on their faces. Not many people knew about this. But today, the great Qin king had said it himself. Old Qin. Someone cried out in shock and turned pale. He immediately shouted, "Seal this place and erase the memories under eternity." The great Qin king calmly said, "What are you panicking about? Erase what memories? What difference is there? My strength is still the same as before, there's not much difference. It's just that in the past, I could die 3 times. Now, I can die once. However, if others can kill you once, they can kill you 3 times. Is there a difference? There's no wall in this world that won't let in the wind." The great Qin king said calmly, "El said this so that everyone can be prepared. I want everyone to know the situation so that if something happens, no one will know the situation." At this moment, the expressions of the unrivaled experts were filled with grief. 2 out of 3 bodies had fallen. How could that be? The great Zhou king's eyes were also flickering, but he did not say anything. He knew the situation. However, he did not expect the great Qin king to say it in public at this moment. The great Qin king was very calm. He looked behind him and said indifferently, "What's there to be afraid of? I've already said that Suyu has given us medicine. Furthermore, he has given us the primordial regression divine saber in the starry manner. His strength is not much different from before." Then, he said, "If you die 3 times or once, you will die. All of you are crying. Who are you going to show it to?" The great Qin king snorted, "Besides, I'm not the only human at level 9 of eternity. Lao Zhou, Lao Xia, Lao Zhu, and the others are almost the same. Even if we lose a level 9 of eternity, it won't make any difference." "Old Qin, you can't say that." On the other side, the great Tang king said lightly, "Old Qin, if you're not here, we won't be convinced if others take over." "That's right. Old Qin, let's listen to what you have to say. As for the others, who knows what they're thinking?" The great Qin king frowned and shouted, "Shut up." The group of people instantly fell silent. The great Qin king looked at them and snorted, "If they're all so obedient, why are there so many things to do? This place is filled with human experts, who are you pretending to be? If I really die, I only hope that you won't beat your brains out. There's not much I can do. All these years, the only thing I can do is not let the human race fight amongst themselves forever. El can't do anything else. If they really submit to me, why should the human realm be like this?" You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2869, Chapter 2869, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills Chiu Subscribe, 2. Chapter 2869, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills Chiu Subscribe, 2. The expressions of the group of invincible experts changed. The great Qin king said coldly, "The human realm might seem powerful, but it's actually extremely dangerous. Everyone knows this. I'll know that a group of you have your own plans. You can retreat to the small world, or you can focus on opening the restrictions on the human realm, or you can simply join the great clans. No matter how many plans you have, the human realm will really collapse. I hope that the promises of the great clans will still be kept." The great Xia king said softly, "Great Qin king, you are overthinking things. If you retreat to the small world and open the restriction, there might be people who have the heart to join the great clans, but there probably isn't." "There isn't." The great Qin king laughed coldly, "Even I have experts to persuade me. I can bring the Qin families young and old to join other clans and change their human bodies. I can become a king with a high position and authority. Will none of you come to persuade me? They even allowed me to have the immortal emperor bloodline, the devil emperor bloodline, and the divine emperor bloodline to become a descendant of the imperial clan. Don't you have any?" He laughed coldly, somewhat domineering and somewhat cold, "I'm alive, so don't think about it. I'm dead, so you can think about it yourselves. I'm alive, so all of you better behave yourselves. I don't care about internal strife. If you betray the other clans, I'll definitely kill you. Let's see, who among the clans dares to protect you? Great Qin Wang. Great Zhou Wang Qing shouted, a bunch of juniors are here, stop talking. Great Qin Wang was incomparably cold, it's precisely because the juniors are here that I'm saying these few words. They're all from the past, and I don't want to meet with weapons and let the juniors see a joke. Beside him, Su Yu was alone, only listening and not speaking. He was also silently observing and judging, trying to judge the invincible thoughts of the human race, their thoughts and their positions. There were only a few factions in the human realm. The main fighting faction was led by the Great Xia King. The main peace faction was led by the Great Zhou King. The Great Zhou King had always thought this way. The main peace faction was to open up the restrictions of the human race and focus more on internal matters while minimizing external conflicts. The third faction was to retreat and find a small world to spend the rest of their lives in. The fourth faction was the surrender faction. This faction existed. Just as the Great Qin King had said, the great clans had promised that if you went to the immortal clan, I would convert you into the immortal emperor bloodline. You would have a high position and status, but from now on, you would abandon your human body and no longer be a human. As for who was in charge of this faction, no one would stand out. Even if they had thoughts, they would think about it silently. Otherwise, they would anger the Great Qin King, who had never participated in the factions. Whether it was fighting, making peace, or retreating to the small world, they were all paths to the future. Only the surrender faction would be suppressed by the Great Qin King. Were there many surrender factions? How many were there? It was unclear at the moment, but everyone knew that this faction definitely existed. It was only because of some people's might that they did not dare to do it. Just as the Great Qin King had said, if you dare to do it, I dare to kill you. Be it an assassination or a forceful killing, I will kill you even if I have to throw my life away. Only then would the human race be able to maintain its unity. Seeing that everyone was silent, the Great Qin King continued, he said, I'll know that some people know some of the things that happened in the ancient times. They know about the changes in the previous 9 tide flows. Some envoys will even specially tell you and tell everyone how they suffered a crushing defeat in the previous 9 tide flows. How miserable the human race was. However, I want to say that since the 9 times were not enough to wipe out the human race, then the 10th time will be enough to wipe out the human race. We are the ancient emperors. The Great Qin King said coldly, since the ancient times, the human race has been fighting 9 times. They have been conquering the heavens. They are not afraid of failure. Let's do it again. Will their bones become soft after the 10th time? At the side, the Great Zhou King sighed, it's not that our bones are weak, it's that we have fought 9 times. The older generation is done. In the first 9 times, there were more or less some experts left behind from the previous tide, but this time, none of them are left. Old Qin, everyone doesn't want this either, but, right now, there is still more hopelessness. There is no hope. The Great Qin King said solemnly, there is no hope. He pointed at Su Yu, young man, isn't that hope? If there's one Su Yu who can kill the Wisdom King, there'll be 10. If there's 100, kill him until the heavens bleed. Many people looked at Su Yu, but Su Yu's expression was calm. He even wanted to laugh. Don't look at me, I didn't say anything. I'm just a bystander. Su Yu was a little bored, so he took out a small fur ball and started to play. The Great Qin King wanted to say something else, but seeing the situation, he felt helpless. Su Yu was really out of tune. What was he thinking? As for the others, they looked at him playing with that furry fellow and felt a chill run down their spines. Just this thing had a pair of extremely powerful parents that could swallow half the emperor. Were they afraid? Su Yu's expression was calm, and he didn't care about this. Soon, he took out another bright flower and looked at the hairy ball with a smile. Good boy, look at how skinny you are. Eat a little. Su Yu. The great Qin King shouted in a low voice, what are you doing? What are you feeding the nine-leafed heavenly lotus to? As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. Everyone looked at Su Yu and looked at the flower petal in his hand. Su Yu frowned slightly and quickly recovered his smile. He said softly, Your Majesty, you have lost your composure. Hairy Ball is my brother. What's wrong with feeding him a nine-leafed heavenly lotus? Su Yu smiled. 9 petals. Is there a problem with giving him 1 petal? Su Yu laughed. It's not of much use to me. As soon as these words were said, someone could not help but say, Su Yu, this treasure can help someone advance to the Tao Merge realm. If you really don't need it, the great Qin King. Su Yu said calmly, my things can be fed to anyone. Everyone, there's no need to say anything more. Moreover, with 1 petal broken, there are only 8 petals left. How can it be so easy to advance to the Tao Merge realm? You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2870, Chapter 2870, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills Chiu Subscribe, 3. Chapter 2870, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills Chiu Subscribe, 3. He scoffed and soon, he chuckled as he stuffed the 9-leaf lotus into Hairy Ball's mouth. He forcefully pinched Hairy Ball's mouth so that no one else could see it, he smiled and said, I'll give you 1 petal. There are 7 more. We'll eat them later. At this moment, golden light shone on Hairy Ball's body. Su Yu smiled and stuffed it into his head. His head was also shining with a golden light. The group of people were stunned. F***CK. Animals. 1 petal of the 9-leafed heavenly lotus, it shouldn't be difficult to exchange it for a load, right? This animal, he fed it to Hairy Ball. The rest still needed to be fed. Animals. The group of people cursed in their hearts. Behind them, the eyes of the sun and moon were about to pop out of their sockets. What was going on? The 9-leafed sky lotus had been fed to a pet. Aw! The group of sun and moon could not wait to roar. If you don't want it, you can just throw it on the ground and we can pick it up. How could you do this? The great Qin King was first angry, and then, his heart trembled slightly. Where did the 8 petals come from? If he was not blind, Su Yu had already split 3 petals back then. Where did he get the 8 petals? What was this fellow doing? As for Su Yu, he had a calm expression on his face. In his sea of will, Hairy Ball felt nauseous and wretched. He shouted aggrievedly, What are you doing? It's so disgusting. It's so bitter. It's so disgusting. Even though I'm here, you're still bullying me. Su Yu quickly said, Cut the crap. I'll split it with you once I earn money. Senior, please don't take offense. Hairy Ball and I are brothers. I'll split it with you once one earn money. Hairy Ball, right? Hairy Ball was stunned, but he quickly said dejectedly, all right. Seriously, just tell me in advance. Su Yu couldn't be bothered with him. Little guy, you've got guts. You still dare to bicker with me. If your mommy isn't here, I'll deal with you next time. Su Yu sent Hairy Ball away. Seeing that everyone was still looking at him, he couldn't help but laugh and said, What's wrong? Your Majesty Qin Wang, let's go. There's nothing to see. Does Your Majesty Qin Wang want to buy 1 petal? At a friendly price, 3 carriers, or an invincible corpse. I'll sell it to you. The great Qin King said dryly, No need. 1 petal is useless to me. Su Yu laughed, That's right. I told you that this thing is useless to the 3rd level of the Immortal Soul stage. The outside world is just exaggerating. The great Zhou King laughed lightly. City Lord Su, if it's really one petal, there's still a chance of advancing to the third level of the immortal soul stage. What a pity. Su Yu smiled and nodded, it's a pity. That fellow, Xuehua, insisted on breaking one of my leaves. Look, I'll kill him. This person, he can't get it himself. If he insists on destroying it, isn't that courting death? The great Zhou King took a deep look at Su Yu, and very quickly, he smiled and said, City Lord Su is quite generous towards the divine devouring prince. It shouldn't be difficult to exchange even one of these leaves for a bearing object. Su Yu smiled and said, there's no need. I have plenty of things like bearing objects. After saying that, a book appeared in Su Yu's hand, and he said with a smile, isn't it rumored that I'm forging evil soldiers in the outside world? It's true. Just this one, I spent 40 bearing objects. Who? Some people really couldn't hold it in anymore. They took a deep breath, and for a moment, there were sounds of breathing around them. Is this for real? The great Zhou King took a look at the book, but he didn't probe further. Probing now was a provocation. He only felt it a little. The great Zhou King nodded his head lightly and said, good treasure. The last time I refined weapons, this was the one that caused the lightning tribulation, right? Evil weapons, be it evil weapons or holy weapons, all weapons are used to kill people. It's nothing, it's just that. This weapon of yours really consumes a lot of energy. Su Yu chuckled and said, it's not bad, it's only 40 load-bearing items and a few invincible corpses. This thing is only useful when it's upgraded to a divine weapon, it's still not as useful as my fist. The group of people were speechless. They felt that Su Yu was flaunting his wealth. He was too rich. He was too extravagant. This was crazy. He had used so many treasures to forge this weapon. 40 items were enough for 20 sun and moon experts to upgrade to invincible. Madman. At this moment, the great Qin King no longer thought about the 9-leaf sky lotus. Instead, he looked at Su Yu's book and exhaled, how many items are you going to fuse into it? 10,000. Su Yu smiled, it's not too much to have too many. It doesn't matter if it's too little. It doesn't matter. Of course, the more carriers, the better. Does the great Qin King have them? If he does, I can use other treasures to exchange for them. It's enough to exchange for 3 or 5. As he spoke, 2 dragon blood fruit trees appeared. In the next moment, the millstone-sized sand of the Milky Way appeared, and in the next moment, water droplets that were like small mountains appeared. Following that, countless dragon twining trees appeared. Su Yu smiled and said, El came to the human race this time and met His Majesty, the Qin King. I also want to ask if there are any extra carriers. The great Qin King was speechless. The others were all silent. Each and every invincible person was shocked. Just how much did this grandson Su Yu get from the Starry Manor? There were too many treasures. At this moment, if it wasn't for the fact that he still had some rationality, everyone would have wanted to kill him. He was simply too rich. Anyone who killed him would become rich. The great Qin King felt a little dry. After a long while, he said, forget it. Even if there are treasures, we can't exchange them. The human race still needs a vessel to allow the sun and moon to advance. Right now, a large number of the sun and moon lack a vessel, so they can't advance. Su Yu smiled and said, isn't that simple? Learn from me. Kill dozens of invincible ones. Even if you break some, there's still some left. How about this, Your Majesty? I can support you a little and win 30 to 70% of the loot. The great Qin King was silent again. We want to do a job. But 30 to 70% is fine. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2871, Chapter 2871, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills 4. Chapter 2871, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills 4. The key was that you were too rich and couldn't be bothered to take you along. The great Qin king said calmly, "Forget it, we'll slowly raise it ourselves." Behind Su Yu, the great Xia king couldn't help but say, "That big millstone, is it the Milky Way sand?" "That's right. That, is it for sale?" Su Yu smiled and said, "We'll talk about this later." "Your Majesty, you want to buy it to open the Sea of Consciousness realm, right? We can talk about this alone." The great Xia king was delighted. "That's good." Su Yu also smiled. "Of course it's good. The Sea of Consciousness realm is mine, not yours. What's so good about you?" The others, including some invincible ones, couldn't hold back anymore at this moment. Tianzhu King hurriedly said, "Are you selling those dragon twining wood? Those aren't heavenly soldiers, but I can forge them into heavenly soldiers." "Su Yu, I'll help you forge them for free. 30 to 70%. No. 20 to 80% is also fine." He looked at Su Yu with some anticipation. Seeing that Su Yu didn't say anything, he immediately said, "L really can't. 19%. Under normal circumstances, if you want to find me to forge heavenly soldiers, you'll need to prepare 2 sets of heavenly soldier materials. I'll charge 1 set as the forging fee. Now, I only want 10%. Su Yu smiled, "No need to trouble yourself. I'll send these things to my teacher as practice later. Things like forging weapons still need practice. After a few hundred times, my teacher might be a heavenly soldier master." "Thank you, Tianzhu Wang." Tianzhu Wang was going crazy. He hurriedly said, "Zhao Li." He had indeed gained something from weapon forging the last time, but at most, he was only at the peak of the earthly weapon realm. Moreover, his strength was not enough. If he were to fight with these materials, he would at least cripple 50% of them. Even if he were to advance to a celestial weapon master, the gains would not make lid for the losses. Su Yu smiled and said, "It's fine. They're just some trash materials. I don't need them. My teacher should be able to advance after forging a few hundred times." As he said that, Su Yu smiled and said, "If Senior Tianzhu Wang wants to forge, I'll give you 1 or 2 sets later. As long as Senior is willing to forge weapons in front of my teacher and let us experience the art of forging weapons, then the materials for forging weapons can be considered as my gift to you." Forging weapons. Tianzhu Wang was slightly startled and hesitated. This PM not on the same path as the Zhao family's forging weapons. Forging heaven weapons might involve some of my personal beliefs. Su Yu smiled. "Then forget it." Since he wasn't willing, then forget it. If he was willing, the weapon forging was actually quite difficult. He had to go all out, it was very interesting. No matter how strong his bloodline aura was, he had to expose it. Tianzhu King had doubts. The weapon forging technique indeed involved some personal things, but it wasn't a big problem to not forge a Dao weapon. Just as Su Yu was thinking about it, the Tianzhu King gritted his teeth and said hurriedly, that works too. The materials for weapon forging will be yours. Once the weapon forging is completed, the weapon that is completed will be mine." "Of course." Su Yu smiled and said, "This is a small matter. If my teacher wants to advance to the Heavenly Soldier Division, he still needs to observe a little, including myself. I feel that if I purely forge weapons now, there is still hope for me to reach the peak of the Earth weapon forging stage. As for the Heavenly Soldier Division, if I watch it a few more times, I feel that I can do it too." Only then did the group of people suddenly remember that this person was also someone who had forged heavenly weapons before. The book in his hand was forged by himself. Because his foundation was too good, but this also meant that Su Yu's skill in forging weapons was quite superb. As for his teacher, everyone knew that he wasn't talking about Bai Feng, but Zhao Li. Zhao Li was going to be rich. There were so many dragon twining trees. Although they weren't at the heavenly weapon level, they could be used to forge heavenly weapons. Once they were at the mid-tier of heavenly weapons, they could be used as carriers. Everyone felt that Su Yu was flaunting his wealth. However, he was really rich. He was too rich. Su Yu's expression was calm as he continued to walk around. As he walked, he asked, "Your Majesty, are there any seniors in the human race who are good at alchemy?" Alchemy? The great Qin king looked at him and asked, "When you say good at alchemy, how good are they? For example, those who can refine peak earth, grade pills, or even heaven, grade pills?" No. The great Qin king shook his head. There are even fewer people who can refine pills than soldiers, let alone those who have reached the realm of heaven alchemists. There is no such person in eternity. Su Yu had a regretful look on his face as he casually took out an alchemy cauldron. He sighed and said, "Heaven-grade pill furnace. It looks like it can only be covered in dust. I still want to get someone to help me refine a furnace of pills." Behind him, the group of people were stunned. Unrivaled was still restraining himself. The sun and moon stretched out their necks to take a look. Heavenly weapon cauldron. Su Yu casually played with it and smiled, "Little cauldron, show me a golden pattern." That cauldron seemed to have a spirit. A moment later, it really showed 140 golden patterns. Wow! This is the pinnacle of the heavenly weapon. At this moment, Invincible couldn't hold it in anymore. The pinnacle of the heavenly weapon. On the other side, the heaven-cast king also took a deep breath. This should have been a mid-tier heavenly weapon, but this medicinal cauldron must have experienced countless years. The earth fire kept on burning, but it wasn't able to destroy the cauldron. Instead, it was refined countless times, becoming stronger and stronger. This cauldron is a precious treasure. J. Supreme treasure. The answer given by a heavenly weapon master. Su Yu said calmly, "It can be considered a treasure. Unfortunately, there isn't a suitable alchemist. It looks like it can only be broken and swallowed by my evil weapon." Su Yu put away the cauldron, he smiled again and said, "Actually, one came to the human race this time with a request. I refined this civilized will, hoping to become stronger and stronger. However, I still lack some things. Last time, His Majesty the Great Ming King provided me with a heaven-grade great array, and Principal Nyo refined a powerful divine talisman for me. However, this civilized will of mine still lacks something. It lacks a great imprisonment array." You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2872, Chapter 2872, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills Chiu Subscribe, 5. Chapter 2872, Chapter 606 Su Yu's Acting Skills Chiu Subscribe, 5. Su Yu's eyes were burning as he said, "I want to be civilized and undefeatable. One will imprison them all and kill them all. It would be best if I can imprison the river of time. I need experts who are proficient in the laws of time and imprison to help me." Su Yu turned his head to look at the undefeatable human. "Senior Silkworm Extermination King, Senior Sky Imprison King, if the two of you are willing to help me perfect this treasure and create a restrictive array, I am willing to reward you with a treasure." Treasure. Silkworm Exterminating King swallowed his saliva. "What treasure?" Su Yu chuckled. "The two of you don't like ordinary things. And there's nothing good about them either." After saying that, Su Yu took out a few items. "This is the water condensation bead, a body forging and 9 transformations treasure. It's not much, but it's a lot. If the two of you need it, I can give each of you a ton." "A ton." The Silkworm Slayer King hadn't paid much attention at first, but when he heard this, his mouth opened slightly. He was playing. Calculated by the ton. This is a heaven origin fruit. Of course, the quantity and quality of the heaven origin energy are about the same. In reality, it's not a heaven origin fruit. According to the heaven origin fruit, I'll give each of you 10,000 pieces. 10,000 pieces. The other invincible experts were all slightly shaken. They were playing. The heaven origin fruit was calculated by 10,000 pieces. This is the essence blood of the sun and moon. The two of you don't need it. I don't have much either. 300 drops for each of you. He stopped talking. Suyu smiled again and said, of course, these are all small things. When my teacher creates a heavenly weapon, I'll give you 3 heavenly weapons each. If you have enough dragon twining tree, you can create a few heavenly weapons. Suyu said with a smile, and my only request is that the formation can burst out instantly and imprison the river of time. It doesn't need to imprison 2 powerful experts. 6 or 7 levels of eternity will do. At least 1 second is enough for me to crush him with 1 punch. On the other side, Silkworm King took a deep breath and said, 6 or 7 levels of eternity? 1 more second, that's almost impossible. It was too difficult. Suyu smiled and said, it's fine if you don't restrict it, but at the very least, it can slow down the opening of the river of time. It won't affect the opponent's battle strength, and it won't restrict the opponent's body. What I need is to restrict the river of time. That's not the same concept. I'm not saying that sealing the 6 or 7 stages of eternity would be too difficult. I'm only targeting the river of time. Hearing this, the great Qin King said in a deep voice, can the two of you create such a great formation? If you can. It won't be of much help to us, but if Suyu obtains it, he might be able to unleash great power. If they took it, it wouldn't be of much use. Everyone had the same strength, so sealing a 6th or 7th level river of time wouldn't be of much use. If you were to charge forward, you would not be able to kill the other party. However, if Suyu were to obtain it, that would be like adding wings to a tiger. The Silkworm Exterminating King took a deep breath and said, difficult. We still have to call on the great Ming King. He will be in charge of providing the foundation of the formation while the Heavenly King of Prohibition will be in charge of setting up the confinement method. I will coordinate with him and replenish the power of time. Only then will we have a chance of completing the forging of this formation. The Forbidden Heavenly King thought for a moment and nodded. That's fine too. As for Suyu, he smiled faintly and said, Senior Little Zhou Wang is also good at the power of time. Why don't you lend a hand? Senior is good at time acceleration. If you coordinate with Senior Silkworm Exterminator's power of time, it will definitely be even stronger. Speed up the operation of the formation and defeat the enemy in an instant. Senior and my Grandmaster, the 5th generation Yibatian, are good friends. One think that Senior should not be stingy with a little help. As soon as these words were said, especially after Yi Beishan's incident, everyone suddenly fell silent. Not far away, little Zhou Wang glanced at Suyu and calmly said, sure. Suyu smiled and said, then I'll have to trouble Senior. This time, when I return to the human realm, perhaps. I still need Senior's help with some other things. The more one outline the divine inscriptions, the more frustrated I get. One heard that the great Zhou King has nurtured artificial divine inscriptions. If you don't mind, I hope to visit a few. Of course, I won't look for nothing. If the great Zhou Manor has any conditions, feel free to open them. Suyu was rich and powerful. He laughed loudly and said, what do you want? I don't have it. Then go buy it. Go exchange it. I only hope to see how the divine runes can be artificially produced. The little Zhou King said in a deep voice, this matter still needs to be discussed. Later on, my great Zhou Manor will reply to City Lord Su. Su Yu laughed and said, then I'll have to trouble you. I hope I can get what I want this time, to be able to artificially nurture the divine runes. TSK, what a formidable method. Beside him, the great Zhou king smiled and said, it's just a small trick. It's not as good as the few cultivation techniques you've promoted. Moreover, there are many flaws in it, and it relies too much on it. If you see it, you'll naturally understand. Su Yu smiled and said, that's also a divine art. Divine arts were the embryonic form of rules. To be able to create artificial divine arts, did he grasp the rules? Or did he have other methods? He was really curious. For a moment, Su Yu seemed to be having a good conversation with everyone. Everyone was greedy for his money, and he was greedy for everyone's talent. Thus, the Heavenly King, Little Zhou, and Silkworm Extermination King all agreed to help him create the formation, the Heavenly Caste King agreed to help him observe the weapon forging. What a wonderful thing! I hope that all of you will do your best. Su Yu had a smile on his face, and his smile was incomparably brilliant. Beside him, the great Zhou King looked at him thoughtfully and also revealed a faint smile. For a moment, the conversation became even more joyous. The great Qin King did not think too much about it. He was still thinking about the 9-leafed heavenly lotus. Su Yu. Where did he get the 8 petals? More importantly, it was so extravagant. He had really fed Harry Ball a piece. It was too extravagant, too wasteful. Could it be that Su Yu had discovered the 9-leafed heavenly lotus when he reached the 8th level? The great Qin King was puzzled. As for Su Yu, he clearly had no intention of explaining. As long as everyone knew, it was fine. 1. Su Yu, am rich. The 9-leafed heavenly lotus is a snack for Harry Ball. This thing is not of much use to me. I am a person who lacks everything except treasures. In the future, when I sell this thing, don't be surprised. There is no other, dog food existence. If I sell it, I can exchange it for something I need. It's too normal. Not much, just 7 petals. Today, with so many people here, Su Yu's face was full of smiles. I don't believe it. These people are all tight-lipped. It's better to have more people. The news will probably leak out soon. One person knowing it is a secret, but 2 people knowing it isn't. A large group of people knowing it, perhaps it will soon become a secret that the heavens know. The higher-ups all know it, but they are hiding a secret that they don't know. Su Yu's smile became even more brilliant. Don't look at it as just a casual conversation. He had rehearsed it many times. Finally, he found an opportunity to complete everything that I wanted to do and say. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2873, Chapter 2873, Chapter 607 Every family has its problems. Chapter 2873, Chapter 607 Every family has its problems. At the end of the conversation, a group of people arrived at the entrance to the human realm. The great Qin King did not enter the passage, but stood at the entrance of the passage, looking at Su Yu and the others, said, Human realm, I will not go back first. Old Zhou, you accompany Su Yu back to sea. The king of Great Zhou smiled and nodded slightly. He quickly looked at the king of Great Xia and said, Old Xia, go in and make arrangements. We will be right behind you. The Great Xia king glanced at him and then looked at Su Yu. Without saying anything else, he was the first to enter the passageway. After waiting for him to enter for a while, the Great Zhou king smiled and said, City Lord Su, please. The Great Zhou king is too polite. Su Yu's face was full of smiles. The Great Xia king was the first to enter. Was he trying to lower my guard? Was he afraid that I would feel that there was a problem? The Great Zhou king was thoughtful. The human realm was invincible. If the Great Qin king didn't go in, Su Yu, Yu's greatest reliance would be the great Xia king. Because he came from the great Xia manor, the many divine arts department and the Xia family had a close relationship. The relationship between the two sides was very complicated. Su Yu didn't say much and instantly teleported away with the others. After he teleported away, the great Qin king lightly sighed. At this moment, there were still a few invincible experts by his side, preparing to teleport in. The great Qin king said in a deep voice, "I'm not going back. You guys have to be careful. This is especially so for Su Yu's safety. If something happened to him in the human realm, not to mention the ancient city, the 10,000 races would lose Su Yu as a target. Very soon, the human race would be the target of everyone. It's fine if you're not satisfied or not satisfied. Remember, his safety is very important. If something goes wrong, if your lips die and your teeth turn cold, the day of the human race's calamity will come. Do you understand?" The great Qin king shouted in a low voice, especially when he looked at the great Yuan king. The great Yuan king looked unhappy. No. I didn't say what to do. If it doesn't work, I won't go back. The great Qin king frowned and said, "Stop talking nonsense and go in." The great Yuan king and the others still had to go back. The great Yuan king was also considered one of the high-end fighters, so he was still needed. The De Yuan king did not say anything more. With a dark expression, he followed the others and teleported into the human realm. The heavenly residence. One of the 38 human realm manors. However, the dual saint manors were already dead in name, and there were only 37 manors left. Su Yu had been to the heavenly residence before, and he also knew some of the guarding experts here. When Su Yu and the great Zhou king teleported down, he saw an acquaintance from afar, Yi Hongyan. She was the daughter-in-law of Niu Mansions and Yi Beishan's aunt. She was also the general of Daming Mansions stationed in the heavenly mansions. Her strength had also reached the 8th level of the Sun-Moon realm. When Su Yu teleported over, Yi Hongyan's eyes were slightly startled. She seemed to have seen a familiar scene. Many years ago, she often saw this scene. When her nephew returned, he would always have an invincible companion. Every time his nephew returned, there would be a wave of cheers. However, he was different from his nephew. His nephew, Yi Batian, was overbearing. However, the current Su Yu looked much gentler. Yi Hongyan was slightly stunned. In the next moment, she shouted, "Welcome back, City Lord Su." A loud shout shook the surroundings. The soldiers under the Daming Manor were slightly stunned. In the next moment, some of the elders seemed to recall the past. After a moment, they shouted in unison, "Welcome back, City Lord Su." Not far away, the soldiers of the great Xia Manor were also stunned for a moment. In the blink of an eye, they also shouted in unison, "Welcome back, City Lord Su." The cheers became louder and louder. It was as if they had returned to more than 50 years ago. It was as if they had returned to more than 400 years ago. By the time King De Yuan and the others teleported down, the entire heavenly palace was filled with cheers. At the entrance of the passageway, Su Yu watched silently without saying a word. Was he hot-blooded? Was he excited? Perhaps a little. However, he knew that all of this did not mean anything. Perhaps these soldiers did not understand anything at all. Beside him, the great Zhou king chuckled and said, "City Lord Su, you see, the human soldiers still welcome you very much." Su Yu smiled faintly and said, "I'm flattered." More than 50 years ago, they also cheered for the 5th generation. More than 50 years later, the 5th generation had already died in the heavenly battlefield at the hands of the human race. How ridiculous! The great Zhou king sighed and said, "Fan Hai has already been executed." Su Yu said faintly, "However, what's dead is dead. It doesn't change anything." After saying that, Su Yu still opened his mouth. With a smile that was like holy light, his laughter was bright and clear, suppressing everyone's cheers. His voice was calm as he said, "Many thanks to all the soldiers and seniors for your love. Su Yu is flattered." He politely suppressed those cheers. Su Yu revealed a smile that was like a cool breeze blowing on his face. Everyone felt that the person in front of them was like a saint who had descended. For a moment, they were a little dazed. Su Yu had a smile on his face. He opened his mouth again and said, "This time, one have returned to the human realm. I only hope that I can reunite with my father for a few more days. My father is also a soldier. I still know the hardships of being a soldier. I only hope that you will have the opportunity and time to go back and accompany your wives and children. I only hope that the war will not erupt too quickly and will not continue to erupt. I wish you all the best. If there is a great war, we will definitely win." The moment these words were said, some of the soldiers were filled with emotions. All they wanted was to be reunited with their father for a few days. Only at this moment did they remember that Su Yu's father was also a soldier from the demon suppression army. All of a sudden, countless soldiers felt the same way and said, "City Lord Su, please go back and reunite with Lord Su as soon as possible. The military has finally sent out an ultimate expert. The demon suppression army is amazing." The group of people sighed and did not speak in unison. However, the meaning behind their words made the unrivaled experts beside Su Yu speechless. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2874, Chapter 2874, Chapter 607. The Zhang family has a difficult problem too. Chapter 2874, Chapter 607. The Zhang family has a difficult problem too. When did Su Yu become a member of the military? This fellow did not even count as a reserve soldier. He joined the Great Xia Civilization University, which was still alright. However, he ran off halfway and did not even graduate. After that, he went to the heavens battlefield. Su Yu really was not a member of the military. Of course, his father was. Now, these soldiers had made up their own minds. Su Yu smiled and did not say anything else. Very quickly, he cupped his hands toward Yi Hongyan and gestured. Yi Hongyan did not move and nodded slightly. He no longer cared about Su Yu and watched Su Yu and the others leave. After leaving the heavenly residence, Su Yu also secretly exhaled. Not long after, the great Xia king returned. He looked at the great Zhou king and the others and said, "Everyone can stop. I will send Su Yu back to the great Xia mansion. Old Zhu is also waiting over there. With me and old Zhu around, there won't be much of a problem. Old Zhou, if you have something to discuss, come back in a few days. You have to give Su Yu some time to reunite with his father." The great Zhou king and the others had naturally returned with something to discuss. Su Yu also smiled and said, "His Majesty the great Xia king is right. We do not need to trouble the seniors to escort us all the way. As for the matter of forging weapons and formations, we are not in a hurry. In 2 or 3 days, it will not be too late for the seniors to come back. I also have to make some preparations in case something goes wrong and the materials are wasted." The great Zhou king smiled and said, "That's fine too. These few days, City Lord Su just happens to go back to take a look. When things settle down, we will come back again." With that, the great Zhou king said, "This time, we will mainly talk about the establishment of the Holy Land. Perhaps there is still a need for City Lord Su's help. When the time comes, I hope that City Lord Su will be more lenient." Su Yu's face was full of smiles. "Do your best. After all, we are all humans. I will think of a way to help you. That would be the best." The great Zhou king laughed and did not say anything else. As for Su Yu, he quickly left with the great Xia king. After the two of them left, the great Zhou king let out a breath and said, "All right, if the others are fine, go to my Great Zhou Manor and rest for a few days. Silkworm Exterminator, since you guys have agreed to help him refine the array, don't fool around and help him complete this matter. Silkworm Exterminator laughed and said, of course, this kid is really rich. If we really help him complete it, perhaps there will be other benefits. However, if we really help him create a great array that can restrain the river of time, then this kid's strength will increase by a large margin. Everyone knew that Su Yu's brute strength was very strong. Previously, when Su Yu had launched a surprise attack, he had destroyed an invincible opponent with a single punch. Once the river of time was unable to avoid Su Yu, then it would be amazing. Su Yu could also fight a battle at the 7th level of eternity. As for who would win and who would lose, it was still unknown for now. The great Zhou King nodded. The difficulty is still not small. All of you should do your best. Su Yu's strength is also good for the human race. He has brought the ancient city to guard outside the human realm. At the very least, the first target of all the races in the universe is not the human race, but him. After saying that, he looked at the De Yuan King, he frowned and said, don't cause trouble. Even if you don't like him, just ignore him. The young man has a bad temper and is impetuous. If you were to really fight him, do you think he would be so worried? Do you really think that you will be responsible for leading those guardians to attack the human race? Can you bear such a responsibility? Old Yuan, I don't want to criticize you, but think carefully. It's true that he is a human, but he is not a human either. If you really anger him, do you think he will care whether you are a human or not? When the time comes, he will lead the guardians to kill you. Should we take action or not? If we take action, the human race and the ancient city will fight each other. The 10,000 races will probably be happy to see this as a joke. If we don't take action, we will just sit back and watch you get killed. The human race and the ancient city will turn against each other. The people will be anxious. Will you take responsibility? After the great Zhou King reprimanded him, the De Yuan King said with a dark face, no matter what, he is still a junior. Junior? The great Zhou King said faintly, those who can kill you are not juniors. Compared to the experts of the 10,000 races, we are also juniors. Do you want to try and talk to these elders? The De Yuan King was silent. The great Zhou King said coldly, all of you, stop causing trouble for me. If something really happens, you will bear all the consequences. Let me be blunt. If you still treat him as a junior until now, I can only say that you have no brains and deserve to be humiliated by him. If you are beaten to death, don't blame no one for saving you. Beside him, the little Zhou King smiled and said, Big brother, we all know. Don't worry. Don't worry. The great Zhou King shook his head. Forget it. Let's talk about it when we get back. The group of people did not say anything else. They all followed the great Zhou dynasty's great Zhou manor and flew away. On the other side, the great Xia King was very cold. He and Su Yu were walking in the air. They did not have much to say. In other words, they did not know what to say. Xia Longwu had not returned yet. He would probably return in a day or two. As such, it was still somewhat awkward for Su Yu and the great Xia King. Su Yu was still fine, but the great Xia King's words. He did not know what to say. After a while, Su Yu took the initiative to speak, Your Majesty, were you really at the Nanyuan Intermediate Academy back then? The great Xia King heaved a sigh of relief. He finally had a topic to talk about. Upon hearing this, he quickly said, Yes, but it was only one of the 3 bodies. It was not the main body. So that's how it was. No wonder Su Yu had thought that the great Xia King was doing something. Outside. When the great Xia King saw that Su Yu had opened his mouth, he no longer held back and said, Su Yu, can you sell a portion of the heavenly river sand that you took out previously to the great Xia mansion? Su Yu smiled and said, of course. After all, I'm a member of the Great Xia Mansion. The Great Xia King smiled. Not bad. Su Yu also smiled and said, of course, I also have something to tell the Great Xia King. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2875, Chapter 2875, Chapter 607 Every Family Has Its Problems 3. Chapter 2875, Chapter 607 Every Family Has Its Problems 3. Speak. So you lightly cough away, is like this, I have an elder, left some things in the Great Xia Mansion, I want to take back his relics, do not know can it? Relics? The king of Great Xia was stunned for a moment, then said after a long while. Which elder? A very close elder. Su Yu sighed and said, I want to take away his belongings. I wonder if the Great Xia King will agree. The Great Xia King frowned slightly. Su Yu's elder. Why don't one know who? The fifth generation. Even if the fifth generation died, there wouldn't be anything left behind. After thinking for a moment, the Great Xia King nodded. Of course. Since it's the belongings of your elder, it's normal for you to take it away. This was not a big deal. Su Yu smiled and said, then thank you, Great Xia King. The Great Xia King looked at him hesitantly. You. What are you recording? Su Yu smiled and said without batting an eyelid, nothing much. It's just my first time chatting with the Great Xia King alone. It's very memorable. I'll record it as a memento. The Emperor of Great Xia nodded slightly, but he didn't care. Recording didn't do any harm to Invincible. Even curses were useless. Su Yu smiled and said, then I'll really take it away. The Emperor of Great Xia saw him mention it several times and couldn't help but ask, can you tell me what it is? The Emperor of Great Xia should know. What? Sea of Consciousness Secret Area. The Emperor of Great Xia was stunned for a moment. Soon, his face stiffened, he said with a cold face, you are joking. That was left by Xia Chen. Although Xia Chen is also from the branch of the multi-god language, even if he inherits the Sea of Consciousness Secret Area, the Xia family will inherit it, not the multi-god language. If there were descendants, they would give it to the descendants. If there were family members, they would give it to the family members. If there were none, then they would give it to the descendants. Without the Xia family, if Su Yu said that this thing was his, then it was still acceptable. Now that there was the Xia family, that thing naturally belonged to the Xia family. Su Yu, this guy, was simply incomparably greedy. He actually wanted the Sea of Consciousness realm. Su Yu smiled lightly and said, why is the Great Xia King angry? Just listen to me and you will know if the thing is mine or not. Speak. The Great Xia King was a little angry at Su Yu's insatiable greed. Su Yu smiled and said, let's talk about the source of the Sea of Consciousness realm first. Is it Senior Xia Chen's thing? Of course. Does he have the right to dispose of Senior Xia Chen's things? Of course. Regardless of life or death, the things belong to Senior Xia Chen, right? Of course. Su Yu said again, if Senior Xia Chen turns into a dead spirit and gives the things to me, it won't be a problem, right? The Great was stunned for a moment, and then quickly said, what do you mean? Xia Chen has come back to life. Su Yu smiled and said, that's right, in the dead soul realm, I've met him before. Senior Xia Chen promised to give me the Sea of Consciousness mystical realm. Actually, not only have I seen it, the Great Qin King has also seen it, and the Xia Manor head has also seen it. What? The Great Xia King was stunned. Very quickly, he frowned and said, Su Yu, are you lying to me? Su Yu smiled and said, how can that be? I don't have to lie to the Great Xia King. The Sea of Consciousness mystical realm has indeed been given to me by Senior Xia Chen. It's absolutely true. If the Great Xia King doesn't believe it, I can give the Great Xia King a hint. Su Yu gave a faint smile. The Great Xia King frowned and looked at him. Hint? What hint? Su Yu's smile seemed a little evil. The Great Xia King looked at him coldly. Say it. Su Yu, my impression of you is still okay. If you lie to me and say that Xia Chen has resurrected for a Sea of Consciousness realm, I won't be polite to you. Su Yu smiled and said, that won't happen. Are you sure the Great Xia King wants me to say it? Pitch, tell me. Su Yu looked around. There was probably no one around. He could not help but smile and say, 10 words. The Great Xia King had an ominous premonition. Xia Wuxian, the world's most beautiful man. Enough. The Great Xia King roared and looked around. He was soon relieved. Then, he looked at Su Yu with a face full of depression. He was a little embarrassed to see others. F***ck. F***ck. No one knew about this. He was now the emperor of the Great Xia dynasty. He was one of the pillars of the human race, the person in charge of Xia Dao, and an overlord-level figure. Let some of the things that happened in his youth go with the wind. However, a few hundred years later, someone came to remind him, how ridiculous, childish, narcissistic, and stupid you were in the past. Being drunk was not scary. What was scary was that the next day, someone helped you remember everything about being drunk. Being Chinibyu was not scary either. What was scary was that a few hundred years later, when you succeeded and became famous, someone came to remind you how Chinibyu used to be. The Great Xia King's face was ugly. He looked at Su Yu with a cold face. After a while, he said stiffly, is Xia Chen really resurrected? Su Yu bared his teeth and said with a smile, I'm not sure. He only taught me this sentence. He said that it was to tell the Great Xia King that the Sea of Consciousness secret realm was mine. I don't know if that's the case. I think it's possible that Senior Undead Spirit is joking. The Great Xia King said coldly, who else knows about this? Su Yu smiled and said, not many people. How many people? One, Mansion Master Wan, even one Tianqing knows. Yes, he was there too. Is there more? Yes, River Map, Star Moon. Are they all dead spirits? No, there's also Lu Hong. The Great Xia King pondered for a moment and said, Lu Hong. Alright, the Sea of Consciousness secret realm is yours. You and Lu Hong, forget about these things. There's also one Tianqing. Su Yu smiled, of course, of course. Oh right, Great Xia King, did you really say that? You carved it on the blade, right? Normally, if you carved it on the blade, it would be fine to carve the world's best blade. Why did you carve it? You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2876, Chapter 2876, Chapter 607 Every family has its problems for. Chapter 2876, Chapter 607 Every family has its problems for. Enough. The Great Xia King is a little angry. You're still talking. Don't I care about my pride? What are you talking about? I'm a godless, overbearing, world conqueror. Now I have a son, my grandson is a Taoist priest, and my great-grandson is the lord of the mansion, and you still say. If word of this got out, how would the millions of people in Great Xia think of me? Forget about them. Once the Darming King and the others find out about this, they would treat it as a joke and talk about it for 300 to 500 years, or even for the rest of their lives. When they die, they would have to pass it down and tell their descendants. In the past, when the Great Xia King was young, how he was. In the future, if the human race were to make history, perhaps they would all be recorded in the annals of history. It was too embarrassing. The great Xia King's heart was tired. He finally understood why Suyu wanted to make a video. He was afraid that he would not admit his mistake. Sea of Consciousness Secret Realm. Damn it. Did Xia Chen really give this thing to Suyu? He quickly said, Xia Chen has been resurrected. You said that Long Wu has seen it too. Was it one of the dead souls that killed their way to the Xingyue mansion that day? Yes. What kind of strength? Eternal 7 Dan. The Emperor of Great Xia was slightly stunned. How could it be? When he was alive. Suyu was stunned for a moment. You don't know. Know what? He is your ancestor. He is your ancestor. The Great Xia Emperor was furious. He glared at Suyu. Do you think that after you become the master of the ancient city, I won't dare to do anything to Suyu? Shrugged. L didn't say it. Senior Xia Chen said it himself. He really is your ancestor. L thought you knew, but you didn't know. Senior Xia Chen is a figure of the 9th tide. Don't you know? In fact, he was the one who gave you the relics of the great Xia Emperor. In fact, he helped to open many people's relics. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? It just so happened that all of them were opened and all of them were taken away by. Suyu smiled and said, however, Senior Xia Chen had enemies and didn't dare to expose his identity. At that time, among the remaining humans of the 9th tide, he was the only one who was invincible in the human realm. He had to pretend to be your cousin. Could it be that the Emperor of Great Xia never suspected? The Emperor of Great Xia frowned. Suspected? He thought for a while. After a long while, he said, not really. He was gifted and intelligent from a young age. At that time, before his Yuan Qi had recovered, he was already extremely powerful, even stronger than when I was young. Later on, the passage opened and his Yuan Qi recovered. He quickly stepped into the sky, Ling Yun. Later on, when I entered the ruins, he also entered the ruins. One attained the Tao, but he didn't. At this point, the great Xia King said in a deep voice, there are indeed some suspicious points when you say that. I remember that we once encountered a powerful eternal. Later on, a mysterious person suddenly appeared and killed the other party. Xia Chen did it. There were indeed some suspicious points back then, including the fact that the ruins opened at the same time. However, everyone had investigated it before, but they didn't find anything. Was it all Xia Chen's doing? My ancestor? The great Xia Emperor sank into deep thought. He even forgot about the matter of the number 1 beauty, or rather, he deliberately forgot about it. Suyu smiled and said, Senior Xia Chen said that when he was seriously injured, he gave you the secret realm of his Sea of Consciousness. Didn't the great Xia Emperor suspect it? He said that he still had something to do. I thought that because he was seriously injured, he couldn't enter the eternal realm and became dispirited, so I didn't care too much. I just thought that after some time, I naturally got over it. Later on, he disappeared completely. It turns out, he really died. The great Xia King sighed. Even when he was resurrected, he had the power of a level 7 eternal realm warrior. Then, when he was alive, didn't he have the power of a level 9 eternal realm warrior? Suyu nodded. More or less. Who killed him? I'm not too sure. He probably died together with him. The great Xia King sighed. Is he alright now? The dead souls have their world and their lives. It's hard to say whether it's good or not. The dead souls realm. The great Xia King muttered and quickly said, the dead souls realm is filled with dangers. The humans tried to enter the dead souls realm several times, but there was nothing they could do. Suyu asked curiously, the humans want to enter the dead souls realm? He remembered that Xia Longwu seemed to have barged into the dead souls realm, but he didn't go deep and was killed by the sun and moon dead souls. The Grand Xia King took a deep breath and nodded. Actually, everyone knows about the crisis of the human race. Don't look at how powerful the humans are, but that's why the gods and fiend celestials didn't attack with their full strength. The reason why the immortals went into hiding previously to intimidate the gods and fiend celestials was actually because they felt that the human race could not pose too much of a threat. You can see that the immortals are indeed very powerful. Their initial target was actually the gods and fiend celestials. Suyu frowned and said, "The heavenly ancient is indeed very powerful, and the immortals are also very powerful. But then again, back in the days when the immortals and the humans were in an alliance, the 9 great wars were dominated by the humans. Weren't they afraid that the humans would rise up again? 9 times in a row, it was the humans who started the great wars. But for the 10th time, the human immortals were allied against the gods and demons. What did the immortals think? The Grand Xia King thought for a moment. He said, "There are many reasons for this. One of them is more important. In the early stages, Jingu might not have fully recovered. When we went deep into the immortals to investigate, Jingu probably just came out of the coffin, and then there was the empty theft of the coffin lid." "You mean?" "Yes, Tiangu and the others are all in a deep sleep." The Great Xia King explained, "After all, Tiangu is old. He was in existence from the ancient times. On one hand, it's because he's old. On the other hand, the great Zhou King once speculated that Tiangu might be suppressing his strength to avoid being punished by some rules. That's why he should have been in a deep sleep at the beginning." You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2877, Chapter 2877. Chapter 607 Every Family Has Its Problems 5. Chapter 2877, Chapter 607 Every Family Has Its Problems 5. Overpower. Suyu, slightly startled, afraid of breakthrough, left the universe. He's not really capable of a breakthrough, is he? According to Doubao, Old Turtle first, Jian Tianho second, Jingu third. These 3 may be the peak of the way. Suyu understood a little. You mean that back then, Tiangu was in a deep sleep and had yet to recover, but both the Divine Emperor and the Demon Emperor had recovered. Therefore, in order to ensure the interests of the Celestials, some powerhouses chose to cooperate with the human race. The Great Xia King nodded. Yes, it was Tiangu's descendant, Gu Zhou, who made the decision and allied with the human race. Later on, Tiangu recovered, and the human race became stronger. That was why Tiangu didn't break the alliance agreement, but gradually began to target the human race. Suyu understood and didn't say much. He quickly said, "Your Majesty, then does that mean that the Sea of Consciousness mystical realm belongs to me? My heart is so tired. The Emperor of Great Xia is too tired. We are talking about the big matters of the myriad clans in the sky. How come you don't have a sense of the big picture? At this time, what Sea of Consciousness mystical realm is there to talk about?" He wanted to say that he wouldn't give it, but Suyu's attitude of saying that if you don't give it to me, I will spread it all over the world. What did the Emperor of Great Xia do? This made the Emperor of Great Xia somewhat speechless. He said in a deep voice, "If you take this thing away, what about the civilized masters of the Great Xia mansion? Anyway, they don't have the heavenly river sand to open it." Suyu smiled and said, "Besides, there are no more divine runes. Those non-divine runes can just be casually cultivated." Suyu smiled again and said, "Or when I can't use it anymore, I can lend it to the Great Xia mansion." "Yes, lend it to the Great Xia mansion. Because it's mine." The Great Xia King was speechless and said again, "Xia Chen, did he say anything else?" "He said that the bloodline of your Xia family is the legacy of the ancient human king. The legacy of the War King. Does the Great Xia King know about the War King?" The Great Xia King thought for a moment and shook his head. No, it's the bloodline of the human king, but I don't know if it's the bloodline of the War King. Suyu asked curiously, does the great Xia King have the mark of the War King's bloodline? Yes. Can I take a look? The great Xia King looked at him and frowned. You want to take a look? I want to take a look. Suyu had a smile on his face. The great Xia King looked at him suspiciously, but after some thought, he didn't refuse. A moment later, he drew a picture on his chest. The great Xia King was also straightforward. He tore his clothes, those who didn't know would think that something had happened. Suyu looked over and saw a big saber. The symbol of the Battle King was actually a saber. The great Xia King said in a deep voice, this is the symbol of the human king. However, my bloodline is already far away, so it's not too clear. There are still some in the generation of Martial Dragon, but in the generation of Hu, I'm afraid that it will be difficult to show it unless it's eternal. The power of the bloodline was weakening. Suyu took a look and confirmed that it was completely different from the traitor bloodline mark he saw. Suyu thought for a moment and said, the human race is invincible. Does the great Xia King know who else has the human king bloodline? The great Ming King has a bit of the human king bloodline, and the Silkworm Exterminating King has a bit of the human king bloodline. Suyu was stunned. The Silkworm Exterminating King had the human king bloodline. Anything else? Old Zhou and Old Qin aren't sure, and the Jin King also has some human king bloodline, that's about it. Suyu was deep in thought. Didn't Tianzhu King and Forbidden Heaven King have either? Or did the great Xia King not know either? The Silkworm Exterminating King actually had a human king bloodline. This made the Silkworm Exterminating King even more suspicious. Invincible after opening a mansion. He had the bloodline of a human king. Fire and imprisonment were the powers of inheritance that Xia Chen had mentioned. The Silkworm Exterminating King was not good at it, but the other party could pretend that he was not good at it. Suyu suppressed everything in his heart. He did not care about it anymore. He would know when he turned around and took a look for himself. Perhaps the other people also had the bloodline of a human king, but the great Xia King did not know about it. He was not in the Immortal Soul 3rd level, so he might not be able to sense it. On his side, there was someone in the Immortal Soul 3rd level. The two of them did not say anything more. The great Xia King did not want to say anything now. Countless thoughts rose up in his mind. For a moment, he even thought that he should just kill Suyu, this bastard. Why would he want to find out about this gossip? How annoying. He hoped that Suyu would keep his mouth shut. Very soon, they arrived at the Great Xia Mansion. The Great Xia King looked at Suyu and said, your father is in the Great Xia Mansion. Go find him yourself, or should I arrange for someone to send you there? I'll go myself. Suyu could already feel his father's aura. All right then. The great Xia King hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth and saying, this matter, you and I know about it. Heaven and earth know about it. If anyone else knows about it. Suyu nodded. It might have been spread by Mansion Master Wan and the others. It has nothing to do with me. In any case, I don't want to gossip. F***ck. The great Xia King almost exploded in anger. That's right. It seemed like we weren't the only ones who knew. He hated Xia Chen. Why did he have to say all this to them? How annoying. The great Xia King snorted and flew away. This wasn't a happy day. He was in a very depressed mood. He wanted to go back and beat up that waiter Xia. He wanted to let him know what would happen to him if he got angry. Suyu waited in the sky for a while and listened carefully. Soon, he heard Master Xia Ho's shrill scream and was satisfied. Very good. Back then, when Lord Xia saw him for the first time, he punched him and knocked him unconscious. Not bad. It looked like he would get a good beating this time. Only then did Su Yu descend from the sky in a happy mood. Just like the 10,000 heavenly saints and the great Xia Emperor back then, no one could see him, no one could see him, and no one dared to see him. They could not see Su Yu. As for Su Yu, he had already landed. He didn't even look at the word Su Mansion. It was meaningless. In an instant, he appeared in front of Su Long. His eyes were mixed with joy and guilt, he even wanted to cry. I'm back. Su Long's face was also filled with joy. After the joy, his expression suddenly changed. Su Yu thought that something had happened, however, he heard Su Long suddenly curse angrily, "Bastard, how did you sneak back? Didn't you say that you would return to glory?" "I'm so angry." Su Long was furious. Where was the glory that he had said he would return to? Where was the glory that he had said he would bring back to glory to his ancestors? Why are you the only one here? I thought that it was a huge dragon pulling the carriage, 100 officials escorting it, an invincible escort, and the manor head beside it. Damn it, why are you the only one here? Su Yu's mouth fell open. Is this really important? Isn't the main point that I'm back? As for Su Long, he was so flustered that he almost cried. I've let down the ancestors of the Su family. Su Yu was stunned. Why was he sorry? It was such a joyous occasion for him to be back. He was delighted, but Su Long was filled with grief and indignation. Unfilial son, go out and bring enough men with you. Come back in glory and sneak back. No way. Su Yu was powerless. This was completely different from what I had expected. My father chased me away. There was no justice. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2878, Chapter 2878, Chapter 608, The Grandson of Heaven. L. Chapter 2878, Chapter 608, The Grandson of Heaven. L. Dad. Su Yu's heart was tired. I came back full of excitement. You're too unreliable as a father. You actually want me to do it all over again. Su Long had a helpless look on his face. He was filled with sorrow. It was over. Bastard. Your father. I'm too ashamed to face anyone. He sighed. Last night, one even told your Uncle Chen that my son had returned. The great Xia Manor was so lively as if it was the new year, but you came back and didn't even fart. The main point was that he had bragged to his brothers for a while. When my son returned, he would definitely be famous. Who would have thought that he would come back so quickly without even bringing a soldier with him? When he was out, no matter how good he was, it was useless just to talk about it. As a person, he had to talk about something reliable. Honestly, it was useless to talk about how strong he was. I couldn't tell. I wanted to see how many people there were. Su Yu rolled his eyes. You want people, right? Alright, I'll send a few 100,000 people over later. A few 100,000? Su Long took a deep breath. That's a lot. Su Yu was speechless. Then how about a few 100,000? There's no need, that, are you familiar with Lord Mansion Master? If you are, then, let Mansion Master come to our house for a meal. The Mansion Master he was talking about was not the current Xia Huyo nor Lord Xia Ho. The only Mansion Master Su Long was talking about was Xia Longwu. That was the former general of the Demon Suppression Army. He was also Su Long's top superior and the expert he admired the most. Ever since he was young, Su Yu had been listening to his father's nagging. This nagging had been going on for more than 10 years. Su Long had wanted to join the Dragon Martial Guards a long time ago, but unfortunately, his strength was not enough and he did not succeed. Su Yu had interacted with Xiao Longwu a few times. He said that they were not very familiar with each other, but they were still passable. At this moment, when he heard his father's words, he could not help but say, "Father, Mansion Master Xia has not returned. It will be at least a day or two later. Why don't I invite the Emperor of Great Xia to our house for a meal?" The Emperor of Great Xia. Su Long was overjoyed at first. Then, he paused for a moment and said dryly, "Forget it. The Emperor of Great Xia has not appeared for many years. When he came, everyone thought that it was fake." Su Yu was speechless. Did everyone have to know him? Yes, everyone knew Xia Longwu, and he often beheaded people live, streamed. The key was that the great Xia king was the one who opened the mansion. He was convinced. The father and son chatted for a while, and Su Long quickly put this matter aside. He chuckled and said, "Why did you come back so soon? Didn't you say that it was very dangerous? Also, aren't you afraid that something might happen if you come back alone?" "It's fine." Su Yu smiled and said, "I'm not alone. Previously, the human realm came with the great Qin king and the others. The great Zhou king and the others sent me to the human realm, and the great Xia king accompanied me to the great Xia manor." Hearing the legendary experts one by one, Su Long exhaled and said, "You brat, you've really struck it rich. You've made a name for yourself. These big shots were all legendary existences in the past, and they were all recorded in books. Who would have thought that you would meet them now?" Su Yu chuckled and said, "That's right. There's also that De Yuan king. He fought with me and was scolded by me. If it wasn't for the great Qin king and the others, I would have beaten him up. I wouldn't have been able to beat him to death." "That's what you said." Su Long advised, "When you're out and about, having more friends means more options. Your strength is great now, but you can't be so arrogant. If you're arrogant, the heavens will take care of you. Even if you don't like him, you have to call him father in front of you, and secretly attack him." Su Long continued, "Don't care about face. We're not from a wealthy family. How can face be more valuable than life? I've forgotten what your father told you when I was young. You have to be soft in front and ruthless behind your back. When your father was in the most difficult situation, he was surrounded and killed by several experts from the 10,000 races. He knelt down and begged for mercy. With a backhand slash, he killed 3 or 4 of them." Cough cough. Su Yu coughed lightly and said, "Father, just tell me these things. Don't let outsiders know. Also, the experts of the 10,000 races that you mentioned are all those thousands of tons of stones. I blew a lot of them to death in one breath." Su Long said unhappily, "What do you know? The reason is the same. Do you really think that your father doesn't know anything? You're amazing, you're awesome. Then let me ask you, if you're so amazing, why are you still so careful when you're back to the human realm? Wasn't it not powerful enough? Can you beat all the enemies in the world by yourself? If you can't, then you should keep a low profile, be more down-to-earth, and don't be arrogant." Su Long continued, "On the battlefield, the arrogant die the fastest. I've told you before, right? On the battlefield, those generals in bright clothes die first. You're good, now you're in a white robe, who else can you beat if not you? In the battle of the army, we should first conserve 30% of our strength. In the beginning, the fiercest ones might not be the ones who kill the most, but they die the fastest." In just a few moments, they revealed their foundations and killed 3 to 5 of them before they were surrounded and killed. There were ways to kill the enemy. One by one, one by one, one by one, they killed one by one. Unknowingly, they killed all of them. Su Long sighed. "I've heard about the war between you and the other races in the heavens. You can't fight well. Why do you keep killing the immortals? If you kill too many of them, won't the immortals hate you to death? You have to kill the gods, demons, and dragons. Kill them evenly. The immortals want to deal with you. Thinking about it, the immortals have been killed so many times, so the immortals have to do something. The immortals want to deal with you. Thinking about it, the demons have to do something first so that we can do something. You stupid child, if the celestials don't step out to kill the celestials, they will have to step out too. They are shameless. If they are shameless, will they let you go? Look, now that the celestials and demons have gone into hiding, the celestials will definitely not let you go. You're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2879, Chapter 2879, Chapter 608, The Grandson of Destiny. 2. Chapter 2879, Chapter 608, The Grandson of Destiny. 2. Su Long rambled on. Su Yu listened quietly and smiled. He nodded and said, "Father, what you said makes sense. However, sometimes, you have to kill some people to scare them. Otherwise, they will not be afraid even if they die less." That's true. The specifics will depend on the situation of the war. Su Long nodded. Have you eaten? Not yet. Then I'll go cook for you. Su Long said as he walked out, "What do you want to eat?" Unfortunately, this place is too big. Even going to the kitchen takes a while. It's troublesome. I still like our little house in Nanyuan. Unfortunately, when I went back before, Nanyuan had become a black hole. Su Yu followed his father and smiled. Didn't you say that it's being rebuilt? Yeah, but they're rebuilding. It doesn't smell like that either. Forget it, the house isn't important. What's important is the people. Who knows how many of the neighbors have died? Su Long shook his head. I hope not many have died. We've known each other for decades. It would be uncomfortable without anyone. Su Yu said with a smile, it's probably nothing big. I went to the last big battle as well. The old neighbors have all left. After that, the great Xia manor also settled down. One think it's nothing much. That's for the best. I would like to go and see them, but with me here. It's best not to wander around randomly. Otherwise, it'll cause trouble. There are many people in the myriad clans in the heavens who are watching your father. As he spoke, he turned to look at Su Yu and said, they drew my blood. Can they really deal with you? They can't. Su Yu smiled and said, they can track me. Once PM tracked, it's inconvenient to do anything in private. They might set some traps and kill me. Then you have to be careful. Su Long was still very vigilant. As he spoke, he brought Su Yu to the new kitchen. The kitchen was very big. There was no one inside, and it was not time to eat either. Su Long was also worried that others would live with him. Other than him, there were only many experts watching the outside of the house. Unless there were friends inside, he would be alone. Eating was complete. Su Long took out his apron and a kitchen knife. Su Yu felt as if he had returned to the past. Unfortunately, he could never go back to the past. Su Long began to cut and wash the vegetables. He shouted, "Help me do some work." Su Yu smiled and crossed his arms as he watched from the side. However, he did not help. It was like this in the past. His father would ask for help while he worked, but Su Yu would not help. At most, he would cheer for him from the side. Sure enough, Su Long was used to it. He cursed a few times, and soon, he began to work on his own. As he worked, he asked, "Is there anyone near our house?" Yes, there are 3 suns and moons. There are not many suns and moons left in the Great Xia Manor. It's considered a huge investment. Su Yu smiled and said, but the key is still the existence of the invincible state. Without the invincible state's protection, the sun and moon are useless. Kid, then tell me, is your father a burden to you now? Not really. Suyu smiled and said, he's just a little weak. He's not considered a burden. Don't worry, I remember what you said. Someone kidnapped my father. I don't need to care. I'll chop him to death with a big knife. If my father can live, then he can live. If he can't live, I'll give you a grand funeral. You're just remembering these things. Su Long laughed and scolded, then he said, that's true. Just remember it. We've been on the battlefield for so many years. Let's not talk about other things, but we still have some experience. When your robe Ze was surrounded and attacked by people, don't bother about the robe Ze. Just kill the enemy first. After killing all the enemies, we'll naturally be able to escape. If we can't kill all of them, then we'll all die together. Suyu nodded. Su Long continued, it's just a pity that you didn't join the army. Otherwise, you'd have been on the battlefield for a few years and learned everything. But that's good too. If you really joined the army, you might not be here now. Suyu smiled and said, Dad, the civilized academy might not have learned less than on the battlefield. On the battlefield, it's still more straightforward. But in the academy, there's more deception. Actually, there's still a lot of things to learn. Su Long nodded. That's true. Civilized people do worse, darker, and more ruthless things. Was this a compliment? Or a curse? Suyu did not know. Maybe it was a compliment. Forget it, I'll just take it as a compliment. Su Long did not care about all this. As he was cooking, he said, Kid, I'm going to tell you something. No one can hear me, right? Suyu moved slightly and quickly checked the cue ball. Was he sleeping? Forget it, I'll create some noise barriers first. After putting another one on the little fur ball, Suyu asked, Dad, what's the matter? As he said that, Suyu said sneakily, is there some big secret that you want to tell me that I'm actually a martial artist second generation? Su Long rolled his eyes. Martial artist second generation. Is Qianjuan's son considered a martial artist second generation? Suyu was puzzled. L thought you were a hidden peerless expert. Since that's not the case, you have to tell me that my mother isn't actually dead. Is she a peerless expert? Could she be a time master? What? Su Long was astonished. What master? You don't know. Suyu rubbed his chin. Very quickly, he thought of something and quickly said. Father, you might not know, but my mother is an ancient peerless expert. Bulsh *T. Su Long snappily said, Peerless your mom. Suyu was speechless. Are you scolding me? Or to tell the truth, is my mom really a peerless expert? Su Long cursed, only then did he cough and say, Stop Bulsh *Ting. Your mom is just an ordinary person, a weak ordinary person. It's difficult for her to even practice martial arts. Otherwise, she wouldn't have bled to death just to give birth to you. If she was really a strong person, she wouldn't have taken a fancy to your father. When your father and your mother got married, Qianjun wasn't even a strong person. Have you ever seen a peerless strong person marry Kai Yuan? You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2880, Chapter 2880, Chapter 608, The Grandson of Destiny. Chapter 2880, The Grandson of Destiny. After thinking for a while, Suyu shook his head. That's true. Unless you're also a strong person, Dad, I'll blow you to death when you fall asleep at night. These words were the ones that hurt his heart. When Suyu heard that it was not these gossips, he said in a rather boring manner, Then what else is there to say? Are you going to find me a stepmother, Dad? Cut the crap. Su Long bared his teeth and said, I want to ask you, kid, is there anything wrong with you right now? What? Su Long said mysteriously, is there any headache or fever? Didn't you have nightmares every day when you were young? Are you better now? I'm fine. That's good. Su Long heaved a sigh of relief. When you were young, you kept having nightmares, scaring your father so much that, didn't I have no other choice in the end? Elle couldn't find anyone, but after thinking about it, I did hear that there was a big shot hidden in southern Yuan. He was the disciple of Yi Beishan's mansion master, and he was sent to southern Yuan. After asking around, I found out that it was that Lu Wenyan. Your father gave me a few bottles of good wine before I stuffed you in. Sure enough, you learned a few things from him, and things became much better afterward. I knew that you were a cultured person, and you would rise to fame sooner or later. Fortunately, I didn't let you walk the path of a martial artist. Su Yu was stunned. What did he mean? I knew that he was giving a gift to old Lu. But, what my father meant was that he knew about Yi Badian. Knew about Lu Wenyan. Su Long saw that he was confused. He chuckled and said, "What? Kid, do you really think your father is a fool? Just some random person sent you to learn culture from him? Nowadays, there were a lot of people who cheated the world. Yi Badian. I've been in the army for 10 years, how could I not know him? Even though he's been dead for decades, I've heard of him too. Serving in the army, how could I not know about civilized teachers?" Su Long scoffed, "I'm just too lazy to tell you, kid. Otherwise, if you know more, you'll have more thoughts. I'll know. These scholars talk about pure hearts, anyway, just these things. One don't want to bring you into a trap and be too lazy to tell you these things." "No. Dad, what are you trying to say?" Su Yu was a little confused and surprised at this moment. "So, when I entered the middle school and studied culture with Lu Wenyan, it wasn't an accident, nor was it anything else, it was something that his father had specially done. He knew about Lu Wenyan." Su Long bared his teeth and smiled as he cooked. "What are you trying to say?" "Nonsense. Actually, there's nothing much to say. I just want you to have an idea." "What idea?" Su Yu was puzzled. Su Long whispered, "The golden book in your head." Su Yu was struck by lightning. Lightning struck. Holy sh*t. My dad knows. Su Long saw that Su Yu was so shocked that his face had turned pale. With a look of disdain, he said, "You think you're a big shot? F*ck, you're not as calm as me. What's there to be afraid of? Your father has known for more than 10 years, but no one knows either, right?" At that moment, Su Yu was really shaken. He was surprised and shocked. His mouth was dry as he said, "Dad, you know." "Nonsense." Su Long said unhappily, "How could I not know? It was me who did it, cough, cough. Anyway, that period of time had scared me, so I didn't dare to say anything. You also know that your father, at the very least, worked in the army for a few years. I more or less know some things. One look and you can tell that it's a treasure. I'm F***ing afraid. I'm afraid that someone will cut open your head." Su Long also sighed, "At that time, you had nightmares every day and scared me to death. I saw that your head was filled with blood, and you didn't dare to close your eyes all day long. You were also scared to death. I was afraid that you would be killed by someone, but I was also afraid that you would kill yourself. There was nothing I could do. I thought that that thing looked like a book and was probably related to a civilized master, so I read a book for you and thought of a way for you to find a civilized master and see if I could use literary pressure to suppress it. Don't say that. I showed you the book and you're much better. You said that you dreamed of demons killing you. I'll show you the 10,000 Races Atlas and show you those demons and monsters. After reading too much, you'll naturally not be afraid anymore." Su Yu's mouth was wide open. After a long while, he said, "No wonder there were so many books like this in my house when I was young. I thought you brought them back from the army." Su Long pursed his lips, "Your father is a boor. Why would he bring books back? When I was young, your father told you every day that he would kill this one today and that one tomorrow. He would show you how Mansion Master Xia cuts off heads. If you read too many of them, wouldn't you not be afraid? Su Yu was speechless once again. So, the stories I heard when I was young and the live broadcast of the beheading were all deliberately shown to me? No, Dad, what's going on? Su Yu was really puzzled. What's going on? My dad knows about this golden atlas. But my dad doesn't seem to be strong. Su Long chuckled and said, what do you mean by what's going on? A treasure fell from the heavens. If my son is fated, then he can obtain the treasure. I've heard this story many times. Even with my eyes closed, I know that it's fated. No, Dad, tell me in detail. What's going on? Su Long chuckled and said, nothing much. When you were young, you were only 6 years old. At that time, your father didn't have any money. With you around, it wasn't easy to find a job. I had no choice but to find a place to get some money. Didn't Starfall Mountain say that there were many bandits? El thought that if I killed a few bandits, not only would I be able to earn some money, I could also receive a reward. According to Su Long, that day, the rain was continuous. He ran to the Starfall Mountain in the middle of the night, wanting to wait for the rabbit and kill a few bandits to get the reward money. In the end, that night, the Starfall Mountain was filled with thunder. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2881, Chapter 2881, Chapter 608, The Grandson of Destiny. 4. Chapter 2881, Chapter 608, The Grandson of Destiny. 4. The bandits were so scared that they didn't dare to go out. Su Long waited for half the night, but he didn't see a single ghost. He had no choice. He wanted to leave and come back tomorrow night. In the end, an explosion suddenly appeared, and it almost shook the entire Mount Xingluo. After a long time of explosion, a light spot suddenly fell from the sky. Su Long thought of the legend of Mount Xingluo. This mountain was the mountain range formed when a huge star crashed. He thought that it was the legendary fragment of a star, but that was because he had used all his strength and risked his life when the light spot fell. He found the place. So, you picked up that book? Su Yu was stunned. The time book was picked up. I didn't pick it up. My father picked it up. Su Long chuckled and said, yes, I picked it up. When I saw it. Damn, it's a book. One thought it was a martial arts manual. You know, in the heavenly battlefield, there are rewards for killing people. I was thinking, could it be that in a battle between the strong, someone was killed, so the heaven and earth realm gave rewards as well? I was so excited that one ran back in a hurry. But when I got home, I couldn't open the book no matter what. Su Long was depressed and helpless. Don't even know what that thing is. I didn't even get a word out of it. I've been working on it for a few days, but I couldn't open it. I wanted to find a place to sell it, but I was afraid that I would cause trouble. Su Long sighed, in the end. I hid it at home, but you brat, you came back the next day after I left. I don't know how you found that bastard thing, but it was cut by that golden edge and was covered in blood. You scared me to death. Su Yu was flabbergasted. Don't remember. What do you remember? Su Long said unhappily, you almost bled to death. What else do you remember? After that, you had a fever for a few days. After that, you had nightmares every day. How could you still remember? You don't remember, but I remember. That thing, I don't know if it was recognized by your blood, but it went into your head with a whoosh. You scared me to death, but I didn't dare to say it to the public. I didn't even dare to think about it. One watched you for a few years. When I saw that you were fine, I was relieved. Su Long sighed. Later, I saw that it didn't affect you much, so I had a nightmare. So, one found Lu Wenyan to take you to study. Don't tell me, you've been much better since then. Elle thought that you were fine after so many years. You're probably fine now, right? Su Long looked at Su Yu. But you, kid, didn't say anything. You're so amazing. I was wondering if it had something to do with that thing in your head, right? Su Yu gulped. Dad, you said that you picked it up from the Starfall Mountain. That's right. Su Long sighed. Starfall Mountain. Starfall Land. As expected, that place still has treasures. Su Yu's emotions were extremely complicated at that moment. Starfall Mountain had actually dropped the time book. In his head, it was the time book, right? In that case, could it be that back then, when Shi Guang was fighting with someone, he was killed and left behind a time book? Or was it something else? Also, at that time, it seemed like Lu Hong had also obtained a fortuitous encounter. Was it a coincidence, or was it a certainty? Su Yu fell into deep thought. After a long while, he couldn't help but say, Dad, in that case, you must have had a great fortuitous encounter, a great fortune, to be able to pick it up. Su Long nodded proudly. Su Yu hesitated and said, Then why are you so weak? Su Long flew into a rage. What do you know? If it wasn't for my ability, would I be where you are today? If your dad didn't have the ability, would my underlings, Chen Long, and the others, be able to do so well? Back then, there were many small soldiers in the demon suppression army. Look at these underlings that your dad brought out. They're a bunch of Shanghai Lingyun. They were all brought out by me. What do they know? Su Yu was slightly stunned. That's right. His father's group seemed to have produced quite a few geniuses. To the entire Zhutian battlefield, it was already very unusual for a small group to have a mountain sea. Of course, no one cared about this because there were too many mountains and seas. Su Long sighed. It's all because of you, kid. I had no choice but to leave the army and come back. Otherwise, I would definitely be stronger than Chen Long. At the very least, I'm now a Sun Moon general. Su Yu listened to his father's nagging and said in a deep voice, Dad, does that mean, there's really a problem with the Xinglua mountain? Where did it not fall? It fell into the Xinglua mountain. That's right. Su Long also nodded and said, that place, is actually very strange. Didn't you eat the book? Later, when I saw that you were sick, I thought, is there any way to solve it there? I went to that place a few more times. Let me tell you, that place is really strange. Su Yu really did not care about these things. He had been to Mount Xinglua a few times and had even killed people there. It's usually nothing. You'll know when it rains. The thunder is really loud. Isn't that normal? How is it normal? Su Long shook his head. It's not normal at all. It's just thunder, and it doesn't rain much. The key is that if you lie on the ground and listen, the thunder is louder than the sound on the ground. Su Yu hesitated. Isn't that right? If you listen to the sound on the ground, isn't it louder? Idiot. Su Long scolded, have you been on the battlefield before? Lying on the ground and listening to the sound of the vibrations, for example, if the enemy is a cavalry, if you lie on the ground and listen, the sound will definitely be louder. That is the sound of the ground shaking. If you are an air cavalry, if you lie on the ground and listen, can you hear the sound of wings flapping? Is that so? Su Yu was not sure if what his father said was right. The main reason was that he usually did not care. Normal people would not care about such things. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories. Chapter 2882, Chapter 2882, Chapter 608, The Grandson of Heaven. 5. Chapter 2882, Chapter 608, the grandson of heaven. 5. Su Long continued, so, I thought that this thunder might have come from underground. Don't tell me, your father even dug a hole in Xinglua Mountain. I was wondering if there was a legendary powerhouse ruins. It was dug quite deep and quite a long time, but in the end, there wasn't even a single hair. Su Long shook his head and said, "L didn't understand it in the past. Later, I went to Southern Origin to take a look. Oh, that relic is actually in the air, and it's even in some spatial crack. I thought, do you think there are any relics on Mount Xinglua?" Su Yu was stunned for a moment. Back then, he had faked it and lied to people on Mount Xinglua, saying that there were relics there. In the end, many people went to look for it, but in fact, they didn't find anything. Only Sect Master Tianyi's treasure was dug up by Su Yu. Now, his father told him that there might really be a relic in that place. "Dad, are you serious?" "Nonsense, of course I'm serious." Su Long began to stir-fry the dishes, making sizzling sounds. As he stir-fried the dishes, he said, "Don't talk about those useless things. Kid, have you found the golden book yet?" "I have." "Is your strength getting stronger related to this thing?" "Yes." "That's right." Su Long grinned and said, "It must be something good." "I knew it. I'll suspect that this thing couldn't have landed on the Starfall Mountain for no reason. If an expert killed someone to get it, why didn't the expert come looking for it? L thought that it might have come for something. For example, there's a relic on the Starfall Mountain. Does this golden book want to return to the relic? It said that there's a spirit in a treasure, and a fallen leaf returns to its roots. Do you think that's the case?" Su Yu was stunned once more. What he said made sense. In other words, the time book might have come from a fallen leaf returning to its roots. Shi Guang is dead, and there's a relic of Shi Guang in Xinglua Mountain. Thus, the time book returned to its roots and returned to Xinglua Mountain. In the end, my father stole it. Su Yu thought to himself, the time book. If the time book in his head was really that powerful, could it be that he had used up all of his energy while traveling through space? Thus, he had to use the blood essence of myriad existences to replenish his energy in order to gradually recover. With such a thought, it made sense. Perhaps Shi Guangshi has always been alive, fighting with others on the grid, such as the owner of Lu Hong's law. Both sides fought so fiercely that both sides suffered heavy injuries, and both died. L obtained the heritage of Shi Guangshi, and Lu Hong obtained the heritage of the enemy of Shi Guangshi. That's possible. Su Yu kept thinking about it, and at this moment, he made a series of deductions. There was still a possibility. Or rather, Shi Guangshi and the owner of that rule were the same person. But he was killed. Lu Hong had obtained some fortuitous encounters, and he had also obtained some fortuitous encounters. Fusing together was the entire fortuitous encounter of Shi Guangshi. The reason why Su Yu was able to determine that a time master had been killed was because he believed that a treasure like the time book would never be lost unless one died. However, didn't the time master disappear during ancient times? And only at this moment did Su Yu realize that his greatest fortuitous encounter didn't come from anyone else, but his father. My God! Su Yu couldn't believe it. He had imagined a lot of things before. He had even wondered if his mother had faked her death to escape and if she was a peerless expert, but in the end, it turned out to be nonsense. A peerless expert definitely wouldn't look up to my father. He had even wondered if my ancestor was very powerful, and it had also turned out to be nonsense. His ancestor was a farmer. I'm a gnawing old man, but I'm not gnawing on my ancestor, but my weak father. A father that can be blown to death in one breath. Father, then wouldn't you have missed out on a great opportunity? Su Long scoffed. Nonsense, you brat, if you get it, it's mine too, I'll hit you, do you dare to fight back? With a smack, a spatula came smashing towards Su Yu's head, with some oil stains on it. Su Yu was speechless. Su Long chuckled and said, "Brat, this is what you call an opportunity. You fight to the death outside, and I don't have to do anything. I'll just wait for you to shine. If you shine, then your father, will be plagued by an opportunity that I can't shake off." As he said that, Su Long continued, "About this matter, I've been hiding it in my heart. I've never dared to say it or think about it. I've told you today. Aren't you experts able to change your memories? If you erase this memory for me, it will also allow me to sleep peacefully. It will prevent me from not daring to think about it day and night. When I meet an expert, I'm afraid that others will see through my thoughts." Su Yu frowned slightly. "It's very troublesome to tamper with the memory. That's still better than hiding something in your heart. Can you do it? If you can't, then don't find a reason." Su Yu was speechless and nodded. "One can, but it's not to erase it. It's just to seal a portion of the memory. Usually, I won't remember it. If I don't mention this, it will be very difficult to recall it. It's just to forget the memory. That's fine as well. As long as you don't bring it up to me, no one else will know about it." Su Yu thought for a moment before nodding his head. However, his heart was still in a state of shock. "The time book. My father picked it up. What the heck? To think that I was wondering if there was a huge conspiracy behind it. More importantly, one really managed to fuse with it. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't go that far. Unless all sorts of coincidences had reached their limits. For example, the time capsule had lost its owner completely, its energy had been depleted to its limit, and it had fallen into a deep sleep. Su Yu's blood and sea of consciousness were compatible with Shi Guang. Under all sorts of coincidences, Shi Guang had been fused by him because he had absorbed his blood. But now that all of these conditions had been fulfilled, he could be considered as the chosen one, right? His own father could also be considered as the chosen one. Then he could be considered as the chosen one, while his father was the chosen one. Su Yu was in a trance. He did not say much and helped his father seal his memories. This Chen Yong could do it. Su Yu was now very powerful, so naturally, he could do it as well. It was just a seal, not a complete tampering. It was simpler. A moment later, Su Long continued to cook. He said with some doubt, "What did I want to tell you? How could I forget? I've always been thinking about something, but when I saw you, I actually forgot." Su Yu grinned and said, "You want to find a stepmother for me? Nonsense. Then you forgot to pay the money you owe someone." Su Long had a blank look on his face. "One don't think so." When he saw his son, he indeed wanted to say something, but unfortunately, he forgot about it in the blink of an eye. Forget it, forget it, forget it, forget it, forget it. As for Su Yu, he was deep in thought. Starfall Mountain. There couldn't really be a relic here, right? However, there was an invincible passerby on Starfall Mountain. The Darming King, the Great Xia King, and the others had all gone there, but they didn't discover it. Could it be that these people weren't powerful enough to discover it? Then, would this cue ball fellow be able to discover it if he went to the Dao Merge? That wasn't right either. The Dao Merge was something that the humans didn't have, but the previous few should still have it. Then, the time book. Su Yu thought to himself. From the looks of it, he would have to make a trip to Mount Xinglua to take a look. If there really was a Time Master's relic, then he would be rich. With such a powerful existence, there should be countless good things, right? It's hard to say, perhaps it's just an empty shell. For example, I used up most of my fortune just to forge a civilization will. Perhaps, the time capsule that the Time Master forged had used up most of his fortune as well. No matter what, it was still worth it to take a look. Let's wait for a while first. Don't cause too much of a ruckus. That won't be good. He glanced at his father, who was still cooking, and sighed. This person's fate was really strange. Was his father good at fortune-telling? It was hard to say. Not dying in the battlefield for 10 years, a bunch of old brothers getting promoted and getting rich, and his son fighting all over the world. Saying yes was pretty good. The key was that his father was not strong. The key is that his father is quite cunning. Su Yu thought in his heart and wanted to laugh. Did Lu Wenyan know that his father knew his identity? In the end, he used a few bottles of wine to stuff himself in. Not knowing his identity was nothing. He knew that Yi Beishan's disciple was dismissed by a bottle of wine that cost a few hundred yuan. It was too embarrassing. Under normal circumstances, if a civilized master accepted a disciple, not to mention a few hundred yuan or a few million yuan, it would be difficult for you to stuff it in. If my father gave me the time book, then it wouldn't be a big deal. Su Yu thought in his heart. He was afraid that some big shot had forcefully stuffed it into his hands. From the looks of it now, this possibility had not been completely eliminated. However, if he could really find the Time Master's remains at the Starfall Mountain, then the possibility of someone stuffing it into his hands would be very small. Something major must have happened around 15 years ago. Unfortunately, no one in the entire universe knows what happened. That possibility is above the heavens. Su Yu silently thought to himself as he suppressed his thoughts. He was still far away from this, so he wasn't in a hurry to think about it.